Chapter 405. Yilin, what do you mean? The Qiao family elder's eyelids twitched as he asked Qiao Yilin. The fact that the Qiao family's name would be recorded in the annals of the northern frontier not only moved this elder, but also caused the hearts of many of the Qiao family members present to stir. All of them looked at Qiao Yilin, who was sitting on the patriarch's seat. The Qiao family was an aristocratic family with thousands of years of history. Naturally, there had been many powerful figures in their history, but that was just personal glory. Once these powerful figures passed away, the Qiao family's descendants would not be able to take over, and they would instantly lose their backing. Otherwise, with the Qiao family's background, how could they have wronged themselves to settle down in such a desolate place like the northern frontier, where demonic beasts would often invade? Yan Xingqi was forcefully exiled, and the Qiao family could be considered to have exiled themselves. It was also because of their self-imposed exile that the Qiao family was able to escape unscathed from Lei Qiuxing's usurpation of the Thousand Swords dynasty, and not be destroyed like the other aristocratic families. Thus, no matter how great an individual's glory was, it would not be able to bring much protection to the Qiao family. However, if it was the glory of the entire family, it would be a different matter. The Qiao family had placed all their hopes on Lin Yuan in this revolution. Once Lin Yuan succeeded, they would be able to rely on their surname, Qiao, to return to the center of the Sky Martial Continent stage. Even if the future generations were ignorant and incompetent, the northern region would not sit idly by and watch such a noble family fall into ruin. Moreover, the Qiao family had a strict family tradition, and it was impossible for the future generations to be ignorant and incompetent. As long as they did not do anything as disgraceful as Lei Qiuxing, the Qiao family could be as stable as Mount Tai in this storm of change, and even make a lot of money. Although our Qiao family has many servants, our ancestors valued our family's traditions, and those without cultivation are not even qualified to be a servant in our Qiao family. Thus, with the Reformation, we definitely cannot rely on a group of cultivators to cultivate the land. Not only is there no meaning in leaving the land in our Qiao family's hands, it will even bring trouble to the Qiao family. If no one cultivates the land for a long time, the originally fertile land will be filled with weeds. However, after the northern frontier's prince's residence clears up the land, they will definitely demand taxes according to the land owned by the aristocratic families. Thus, if the land is left in our hands, it will instead bring unnecessary expenses to our Qiao family. Qiao Yilin had already discussed this with Lin Yuan. As an aristocratic family with thousands of years of history, Qiao Yilin was very clear on where his but should land in order to survive. So what if the other aristocratic families in the northern frontier had countless slaves who had signed contracts to sell themselves? Even if they could cultivate their own land, it would still be useless. Qiao Yilin was very clear that the next step in Li Zhong's plan to clear up the land was to determine the ratio between the aristocratic families and the commoners. This meant that the aristocratic families in the northern frontier would have to pay the same taxes as the commoners. The tax rate was actually not high, only about 50%. For the commoners, 50% tax rate was already 20% lower than the original rate. Moreover, the new land could be reduced for another 10 years. In these 10 years, they only needed to pay 20% of the tax. Although the tax rate would be adjusted later, in the first 10 years, not all aristocratic families would be able to withstand 50% of the tax. In the past, the commoners would place their land in the hands of the aristocratic families. Every year, they would pay 50% of the tax to the aristocratic families and keep the remaining 50% for themselves. Therefore, the aristocratic families did not need to pay anything to be able to receive the tax for free. Then, they would use their own privileges to reduce the tax and immediately receive a large amount of income. However, if they were to cultivate their own land, it would be a huge expense. This was because they had no other choice but to use their own slaves. When the commoners responded to the northern frontier prince's mansion's call to cultivate new land, if you made trouble for them, the northern frontier prince's mansion would make trouble for you. At that time, it would not be impossible for your family to be destroyed. No matter what, the aristocratic families also had a limited number of slaves. Even if those aristocratic families who had a large amount of cultivated land sent out all their forces, they might not be able to cultivate all the cultivated land. However, when the northern frontier prince's mansion asked you to pay tax, they would only look at the amount of cultivated land under your name. They would not ask how much you had cultivated. After all, you were able to pay tax for so many years. Now that the northern frontier prince's mansion had changed owners, you would not be able to pay tax. Then, Did you not see clearly the northern frontier prince conferred by the Shenwu dynasty? Or did you look down on the northern frontier god conferred by the Shenwu dynasty? At that time, you would be accused of treason and offending your superiors. You would not even have a place to cry. In addition, did your family have someone in the Shenwu dynasty imperial court? What's the use of that? Lei Qiusheng's words did not carry much weight in the northern frontier. Who became the prince of the northern frontier depended entirely on Lin Yuan's wishes. Just how tyrannical was your family's high-ranking official in the imperial court to be able to command Lin Yuan, who even Lei Qiusheng could not command? Taking a step back, if you forced Lin Yuan into a corner, and he deliberately did something bad, the northern frontier prince's mansion would really take a step back. Once this matter was reported by the embroidered guard, you would be done for if Lei Qiusheng skinned your family's backer in the imperial court. Once the pressure from above was gone, Lin Yuan would make a comeback. At that time, do you still dare to bare your fangs and brandish your claws? With so many methods, no matter how unwilling the northern frontier aristocratic families were, they would still have to hand over their land to the northern frontier prince's mansion. Otherwise, when it came time to collect taxes every year, they would use a series of methods to drag down a large aristocratic family. By the time these aristocratic families knew that stubbornness would not work and they handed over their land, they would find that the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, which they relied on for survival, would also announce a series of business taxes. Although it would not be so harsh that it would force the northern frontier aristocratic families to the point of no return, but in the end, the aristocratic families would only be able to rely on the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. In the end, they could only pinch their noses and bear with it. After fighting with Lin Yuan, Lei Fan and Hu Yan, coupled with the series of information he had gathered from the northern frontier prince's mansion, Xiao Yilin, as a qualified decision-maker, had quickly understood that he was no match for Lin Yuan. Furthermore, in such a situation, the more he stubbornly resisted, the more he would lose in the end. If he chose to side with Lin Yuan, perhaps he might even be able to obtain a certain degree of reduction in business taxes in the future. If that's the case, we'll do as Xiao Yilin says. The clan elder rubbed his hands together, unable to contain the excitement in his heart as he said in a deep voice, "When will our Qiao family donate the land under our name?" Xiao Yilin smiled as he stroked his beard, his heart thumping loudly. If the Qiao family donated their land too early, although they would be setting an example, the other aristocratic families would also react and simply follow the Qiao family in donating their own land. Although the result would be the same, the northern frontier prince's mansion would not be able to vent their anger, nor would they be able to let these aristocratic families experience the terror of the great Dragon King. It would be hard for them to avoid offending Lin Yuan. But if they donated their land too late and allowed others to beat them to it, wouldn't the gains outweigh the losses? Chapter 406. In the newly built government office of Lord Zhang's mansion in the northern frontier. The moment Li Zhong saw off Hu Yan, who had come here to inspect the work, his eyes were full of mockery. Wasn't the so-called inspection just to see what his subordinates were going to do next, so that they could inform those aristocratic families so as to reduce the loss? Pitifully, Li Zhong had foreseen this. Therefore, when Hu Yan came here for the first time, he found that the documents recorded by Fallen Star Army were a bunch of confusing numbers. Additionally, Li Zhong had purchased a lot of books during this period. At the beginning, Hu Yan thought that Li Zhong was a pedantic scholar. However, after many inspections, Hu Yan finally found that those armored staffs were translating the numbers on the documents with different books. However, they didn't leave any notes. Instead, they just glanced at the documents and tore them into pieces before throwing them into wooden buckets with other scraps of paper. After that, they would wait for specialized people to collect them. This was the way the Fallen Star Army used to deliver intelligence during the war. Each group had a series of specially prepared books as translations. Only the veterans of the Fallen Star Army knew which page, line, and word those numbers represented. After memorizing the numbers, they would flip through the corresponding books to translate the intelligence. Finally, they would report it to Li Zhong, who was in charge of the Lord's mansion. I see. Tell them to reply to me. Just say. Li Zhong gradually lowered his voice. Hiding outside the courtyard, Hu Yan slightly frowned as he couldn't hear what Li Zhong said clearly. Neither did he know whom Li Zhong wanted his subordinates to reply to. However, it was Hu Yan's first time to know that someone other than Fallen Star Army was contacting Li Zhong in Shunning City. However, Hu Yan was also a scholar when he was young. After a few rounds of inspection, he had already memorized the book used by the different groups as a book. Today, he also saw a piece of paper with only a few numbers on it, but it was kept by Li Zhong alone. It was obviously important information, so he quietly memorized the string of numbers and hurriedly returned to his courtyard. He flipped open the book that his attendant had bought earlier and began to read the meaning of the string of numbers. You are paid by the people help the people. The people below are easy to abuse, and the heavens cannot bully them. 16 words were found by Hu Yan one by one. After reading this line of words, Hu Yan only felt a chill all over his body. A chill ran up his spine and finally drilled into the back of his neck. Hu Yan suddenly shivered and collapsed on the chair. As a member of an aristocratic family, although Hu Yan knew that Lin Yuan wasn't easy to deal with, he had been beating around the bush, trying to get Li Zhong's policy against aristocratic families. After all, this work used to be planned by Lin Yuan and carried out by Lei Fan. They, the indigenous forces of the northern frontier, basically did not have the right to participate. Now that Lei Fan was gone, and Lin Yuan had sent Li Xian to handle this matter, even if Hu Yan wanted to, he did not have the ability to do so. These words Hu Yan, who had read a lot of books, had never seen them in that book, so he could only conclude that these words came from Lin Yuan. In addition, Li Zhong had purposely shown these words to him, so it should be Lin Yuan warning him not to cross the line when doing things. Mother asterisk cur, mother asterisk cur, mother asterisk cur. Hu Yan cursed a few times, and his eyes were already bloodshot. He said hatefully, surnamed Li, you don't want me to have a good time, so I won't let you have a good time either. How dare you report this matter to Lin Yuan? Good, good, good. I'll let you know who's the biggest boss in Shunning City. If Li Zhong had used other means to warn Hu Yan, because of Lin Yuan's terror, Hu Yan would have admitted defeat. However, Li Zhong had used Lin Yuan's words to make an issue out of it, which made it easy for Hu Yan to connect the dots that Lin Yuan already knew what he had done during this period of time. When he thought of Lei Fan's fate, even if Hu Yan said that he was not afraid, his heart was still terrified. At this time, Hu Yan, who knew that there was nothing he could do, could only drag Li Zhong down with him to perish together. In Li Zhong's mansion, Gao Funjin was still wearing his heavy armor, and said in a low muffled voice, Dragon King said that if you do this, Hu Yan will completely lose his mind. If he refuses to admit defeat, we will have a tough battle to fight. It's not a problem, Uncle Gao. Li Zhong clasped his hands and said with a smile, you still don't understand the Dragon King's intention. Although the Dragon King has set up his own statue in the northern frontier, it is not to show his divinity, but to give the people of the northern frontier a way to reach the sky. In this way, not even the slightest movement in the northern frontier can escape the eyes of the Dragon King. First, eliminate the sects, then weaken the aristocratic families. After these two things are done, the Dragon King should weaken the authority of the officials in the northern frontier, and then increase the authority of the new law in the northern frontier. Gao Funjin was slightly startled. For a moment, it was difficult to understand Li Zhong's meaning. In short, the northern frontier that the Dragon King wants can only have one authority, and that is himself, or rather, the new law in the northern frontier that he has compiled. The so-called officials and army are just tools to maintain and implement the new law in the northern frontier. These people only need to have enough ability to complete the wishes of the Dragon King. They don't need to have any authority, otherwise the reform in the northern frontier will be meaningless. After a few decades, these officials and army commanders will become new aristocratic families and sects, and will be even more difficult to deal with than they are now. To put it simply, the Dragon King wants to rule the northern frontier by law, and not the northern frontier by the king. As long as the new law in the northern frontier exists, and can restrain the people of the northern frontier, then the existence of the northern frontier king does not have much meaning at all. Li Zhong cupped his hands in the direction of the monster forest and said with a smile, to be able to meet a hero like the Dragon King in this life, I, Li Zhong, should be able to put my knowledge to good use. Gao Funjin scratched his head and said in a low voice, then just say that the Dragon King wants to deal with Hu Yan, and doesn't want the northern frontier to continue to have the title of king of the northern frontier. Wouldn't that be the end of it? That's fine too. Li Zhong was choked by Gao Funjin and could only roll his eyes. However, now was indeed the best time to make a move on Hu Yan. Lei Fan had already died of illness, and his corpse was hung in the sect of the blood god. The weak nature of the position of king of the northern frontier had long been seen through by others. If another Hu Yen fell, there would be no need for the next king of the northern frontier to exist. Moreover, it was Hu Yen who had committed the taboo. If the Dragon King wanted to get rid of Hu Yen, no one would be able to find any fault with it. It was much better than Lei Fan, who died without knowing the reason. After all, the people of the northern frontier would not understand why the dignified king of the northern frontier wanted to usurp power. Wasn't the king of the northern frontier the highest official in the northern frontier? Although the internal strife in the Xinwu dynasty was still ongoing, it was not far from being pacified. Getting rid of Hu Yen now was better than finding a groundless crime in the future. Otherwise, who knew how many people would use this as an excuse to attack the northern frontier? Chapter 407. Outside Shunning City, in a barren mountain without any vegetation, Lin Yuan was sitting cross-legged. His eyelids were closed, and his breathing was even, as if he had fallen asleep. Suddenly, there was a series of footsteps behind him. Lin Yuan said without turning his head, "I thought I would have to wait for you for another 4 hours. I didn't expect you to come so soon. The Demon Emperor summoned me. Even if we are thousands of miles apart, I have to put down what I'm doing and wait for your orders." The man behind Lin Yuan did not have the slightest emotion in his tone. He wore a ghost mask on his face, and a black hooded robe covered his body. Lin Yuan could barely see that this man was very tall and sturdy. Without waiting for Lin Yuan to speak, the man stopped and said with a smile, "This subordinate has done my best for the Demon Emperor since I joined the Council of the Demon Emperor. I don't know why the Demon Emperor suspects that this subordinate is related to those guys hiding in the dark." Although there was laughter in his voice, the air was filled with a chill as soon as he finished speaking. "It's not that I suspect you, but you told me yourself that you are not clean." Lin Yuan still did not turn around, as if the man behind him was not a threat to him at all. Even his tone was extremely calm. "I'm all ears." That man put the dagger back into his sleeve, sat down cross-legged, and stared at Lin Yuan. Before this king took over the northern frontier, the Xinwu dynasty had already suffered a great change. The Qingjiang dynasty and the Frost Mirror dynasty besieged it. The Hengduan Mountains and the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas also did not miss this opportunity. It could be said that the Xinwu dynasty was about to be destroyed. At this time, the remnants of the Jiao clan secretly moved and wanted to take this opportunity to overthrow the Xinwu dynasty. However, no matter how many tricks the remnants of the Jiao clan had up their sleeves, they still relied on the Hengduan Mountains to survive. At that time, the imperial court only intended to keep Shunning City in suspense, to create a little pressure for the Xinwu dynasty. However, the remnants of the Jiao clan, who couldn't even survive outside the Hengduan Mountains, dared to put their master in deep trouble, and intended to help the demon beasts take over Shunning City. But this kind of taboo, not to mention the remnants of the Jiao clan who were still shouting orthodox slogans, even those evil cultists who everyone had the right to kill might not have the guts to do it. After all, no matter whether this matter succeeded or not, it had touched the bottom line of human beings. When the time came, the entire Tianwu continent would be purged. These small forces who lived in the darkness but didn't have the ability to overturn the entire world would have no way to survive. Therefore, the remaining members of the Jiao clan set their eyes on the Assembly of Demon Monarch. They naively thought that after the Assembly of Demon Monarch had done such a thing, all the dynasties would just wipe out the Assembly of Demon Monarch. Therefore, they changed into our uniforms and planned to take over the city wall of Shunning City. Lin Yuan's voice sounded indifferent, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. "Yes, I know about this." That person nodded, but changed the topic and asked, "But, what does this have to do with me? At that time, you were in charge of the Assembly of Demon Monarch in Shunning City. Even if I had great abilities, I couldn't have done it under your nose, right?" The remaining members of the Jiao clan were naive. They thought that by framing the Assembly of Demon Monarch, the Xinwu dynasty would only wipe out the Assembly of Demon Monarch. They could then regain control of the dark world in the northern frontier and become the uncrowned king of the underground order of the Xinwu dynasty. But they didn't think that compared to the Assembly of Demon Monarch, which was rooted in the northern frontier, the remaining members of the Jiao clan, who were scattered all over the Xinwu dynasty and even had the support of the people in some places, were really not presentable. If they had to wipe out the Jiao clan, the Xinwu dynasty would never let go of this opportunity to attack the remaining members of the Jiao clan. Speaking of this, Lin Yuan paused, and then smiled. So at that time, It seemed that the people who gave advice to the remaining members of the Zhao clan were either complete idiots, or they didn't care about the life and death of the remaining members of the Zhao clan at all. That is, a third party intervened. They wished that the Assembly of Demon Monarch would die together with the remaining members of the Zhao clan. Not bad. It's reasonable and clear. But that person's tone still didn't change, and he asked again, "What does this have to do with me?" The Assembly of Demon Monarch had eyes and ears all over the northern frontier at that time. With my identity, everything I did, and who I met, it should all be recorded, right? Lin Yuan's closed eyes slightly opened and sneered. On the surface, this matter indeed has nothing to do with you. Even when Dong reported to me that you were involved in this matter, I only said a few words to him, and didn't suspect you much. Even if the remaining members of the Zhao clan weren't wearing the uniform of the Assembly of Demon Monarch, I wouldn't have suspected that it was the higher-ups of the Assembly of Demon Monarch. That person was silent for a moment, and then suddenly smiled bitterly, and murmured, I see. Previously, the remaining members of the Zhao clan had changed into the uniform of the Assembly of Demon Monarch to seize the city wall. Although Lin Yuan didn't pursue the matter, he already knew that there was a traitor among the higher-ups of the Assembly of Demon Monarch. However, he didn't have any evidence. Even if he caught the traitor, he naturally wouldn't be stupid enough to admit that he was the traitor. But this time, when attacking the sects in the northern frontier, the higher-ups of the Assembly of Demon Monarch still didn't keep their hands clean. Especially when the information about the sect of the Blood Divine was suddenly cut off, but no one, including Lin Yuan, received the news. This kind of thing wasn't something that just anyone could do. It was normal for Lin Yuan to suspect him. Moreover, during this period of time, in order to not make any mistakes, he personally stayed in Shunning City to ensure that the news that the sect of the Blood Divine was out of control wouldn't spread to Lin Yuan. Since the last time, when the remaining members of the Zhao clan pretended to be members of the Assembly of Demon Monarch, Lin Yuan had set up some spies in the Assembly of Demon Monarch. Some information that even the higher-ups of the Assembly of Demon Monarch didn't know about would be mysteriously hung at the place where the information was sold. Now that he thought about it, perhaps Lin Yuan had been monitoring them for a long time. Demon Monarch, you are indeed as powerful as the rumors say. I am sincerely convinced. That person took off his black hood and mask, revealing a waxy yellow face. It was a face that was hard to find in a sea of people. However, the waxy yellow skin was obviously due to long-term malnutrition. It didn't match his burly figure, so it was quite distinctive. Although this person didn't look very eye-catching, he was the second most famous person in the Assembly of Demon Monarch. Whether it was Su Nan, who founded the Assembly of Demon Monarch, or Dong, who was promoted by Lin Yuan from Shunning City, even if the two of them were tied together, their prestige in the higher-ups of the Assembly of Demon Monarch might not be comparable to this vice president, Ding Zai, who didn't have the aptitude for cultivation, but was personally involved in everything. Chapter 408. As the saying goes, give me a peach in return. Lin Yuan lazily turned around and said calmly, I have already told you how you were exposed. Are you not going to tell me who you are? And what is your purpose of infiltrating my association of the Demon Emperor? Lin Yuan had a mocking smile on his face as he said coldly, Or are you going to let me ask you myself? The moment Lin Yuan said that, Ding Zai subconsciously shuddered. Tianwu Continent's interrogation and interrogation by torture were actually still the same. It was nothing more than torture and the like. However, as long as Lin Yuan caught a person alive, and it was not the kind of person who was brainwashed to only know loyalty to his own organization, he would definitely be able to ask what he wanted. Although Ding Zai did not know what methods Lin Yuan was using, but even the elite member of the Ether Association, who was known as the leader of the underground forces of the Xinwu dynasty, was unable to withstand Lin Yuan's interrogation and told him everything he knew. To others, whether this Ether Association member told him or not was a secret. But Ding Zai, who was in charge of intelligence work in the northern frontier, was very clear. Not only did the other party tell him everything, he even shamelessly asked Lin Yuan for a job, intending to live his life in the northern frontier while concealing his identity. Although Ding Zai did not mind being enemies with Lin Yuan, but he really did not want to experience Lin Yuan's interrogation methods. Since Lord Demon Emperor has asked, this subordinate will naturally tell you everything, but Ding Zai narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled coldly. I have to give Lord Demonic Emperor a reminder. I'm not in cahoots with the Ether Society. In fact, For a faction like the Ether Society that isn't even presentable, the organization behind me can just reach out and crush them like a bug. Lin Yuan lifted his chin and sneered. If you say so, then I know what to do. However, the Almighty behind you is blocking that door. Do you really have the time to deal with me? When I reach the desolate demon realm, or even a higher realm, do you think that the organization behind you will still dare to provoke me? Ding's eye suddenly fell silent. That door. It could be said to be the highest level of secret in the entire Sky Martial continent. The slightest mistake could lead to the destruction of the entire continent. It wasn't that there weren't any cultivators at the Void Netherworld realm or higher. In fact, there were quite a few of them. It was just that they were all outside that door, guarding against whatever was inside. Logically speaking, with Lin Yuan's realm and background, it was impossible for him to know about the existence of that door. Even Kirin, the beast master of the Hengduan mountain range, only had some guesses, but did not have any concrete evidence. Unless this Lin Yuan was truly the reincarnation of some ancient greater demon. Seeing Ding Zai's silence, Lin Yuan suddenly sneered and said in a cold voice, "The organization behind you is actually not interested in the northern frontier. What they want to know, a small fry like you doesn't have the qualifications to know. So even if you seize the northern frontier from my hands, you won't be able to escape death if you don't get what the big shots want." Gulp. Ding Zai swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Just as Lin Yuan said, with the scale and level of the organization behind him, it was impossible for them to set their eyes on the northern frontier. Even if the northern frontier was prosperous after Lin Yuan's reform, it couldn't attract the interest of those big shots. For them, 1 or 2 territories might not be as tempting as a disciple who could pass on their mantle. But the key was that the orders from above were only for them to infiltrate the northern frontier. They didn't mention the specific purpose at all. And these unlucky people who took the mission to sneak into the northern frontier didn't want to wait a moment longer. Recently, they had covered up the activities of the Blood Divine Church because they wanted to use the hands of the second generation to get rid of Lin Yuan, the biggest obstacle. Then they could take over the northern frontier. After handing over the northern frontier to the organization, they could receive the reward and return to the organization's paradise to cultivate. Now, after listening to Lin Yuan's words, Ding Zai only felt a chill all over his body. At this moment, he realized that what the big shots wanted was indeed in the northern frontier. But it was nothing else but something in Lin Yuan's hands or some secret on Lin Yuan. For them, the northern frontier was nothing more than a small piece of land that they could destroy with a wave of their hand. If they misunderstood the meaning of those big shots, would they have a good end when they returned to the organization? I just gave you a few words of advice. Why are you sweating so much? Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes flashed with cold light. He said in a low voice, "Tell me, which families have come to the northern frontier?" From the information obtained in the secret realm, there were many sects in ancient times, but the most powerful ones were the Fairy Cloud Temple, the Golden Lotus Temple, and the Boundless Academy. They were the leaders of the 3 giants of Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. Even the powerful Freedom Yard was just a branch of the Golden Lotus Temple, and it was a branch that couldn't be seen in public. In addition to these 3 giants, there were all kinds of big and small forces. However, in the timeline earlier than the ancient times, the Tianwu continent had undergone great changes. Countless immortals broke through the gate of heaven and left countless methods and inheritances for people to cultivate. This was the origin of cultivators and demonic beasts. At that time, the cultivators were incomparably powerful. Most of the Void Realm cultivators were like lackeys. Now, the various divine beast clans were all the more prosperous branches of the ancient times. It was said that they had all migrated from the gate of heaven, and some of the weaker ones had either gone extinct or became the rare ancient species. Of course, great ancient clans like the Dragon Phoenix Kirin were still existences that could look down on the heavens and earth. However, this prosperity of the Tianwu continent's cultivation world did not last for long. When the timeline had just entered the ancient times, the gate of heaven moved again. However, this time it was not some kind of opportunity or gift that came out. Instead, it was demons and ferocious beasts that only chose humans to devour. In almost the entire ancient times, it was humans and demonic beasts that fought for survival against the mutated beasts that came out of the gate of heaven. The demonic beasts and evil cult members of today's purgatory were all hidden dangers left behind by those demons and ferocious beasts. Since the ancient times, the gate of heaven had always remained open. Until now, Countless indescribable monsters had tried to invade. They had always coveted the Tianwu continent, either destroying it or enslaving it. The only thing that could be confirmed was that they did not have the slightest bit of goodwill towards the natives of the Tianwu continent. Until now, all the cultivators of the Void Realm and above, regardless of whether they were willing or not, had to guard the vicinity of the Gate of Heaven. The experts who left behind their inheritances even had to take the risk to enter the Gate of Heaven to explore and see what was going on there. However, those who entered the Gate of Heaven never came back. Chapter 409. However, these things were a secret to most of the cultivators in Tianwu continent. It wasn't that there weren't any cultivation techniques in the Void Realm and Desolate Demon Realm, but those who mastered them were all near the Heaven's Gate. And these powerful cultivators were destined to fight to protect this world, so they couldn't be like the low-level cultivators and open up sects to recruit disciples. They could only send out disciples who couldn't resist the creatures in the Heaven's Gate to open up sects and select suitable seedlings from the countless people in Tianwu continent to carry on their legacy. This was also the reason why there were so many sects in Tianwu continent. Lin Yuan also had some guesses about the existence behind the Heaven's Gate, but he didn't have the strength to prove it. After all, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas and Ravenfield Manor were all things he had heard of in his previous life. The world behind the Heaven's Gate wasn't the world he was in his previous life, but there must be some connection between the two. There might even be a path to return to the world of his previous life. But for now, his strength was still too weak. In the eyes of those big shots in the Void Realm and Desolate Demon Realm, he only knew these secrets and had the qualifications to select disciples for them. He didn't even have the qualifications to guard the Heaven's Gate, so how could he have the strength to enter the Heaven's Gate? But with the system as a cheat, Lin Yuan believed that it wouldn't be difficult for him to find a way back. The Shanglu Association that I am in, the Four United Group that the Fire Kirin belongs to, and a person from the Second Life. With Lin Yuan holding the Death Gate, Ding Zai naturally didn't have the guts to threaten Lin Yuan. He could only smile and obey Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan's rock skin closed up slightly. After all, the secret realm was something left behind from the ancient times. In these long years, countless new forces rose, and naturally, countless old forces were destroyed. Anyway, the two organizations that Ding Zai mentioned weren't recorded in the palace, so even if Lin Yuan wanted to pretend to be unfathomable, he still didn't know the background of the other party. After pondering for a moment, Lin Yuan opened his eyes slightly and asked, "The person from the Second Life, is he the ancestor of the Blood Divine sect?" "Yes, according to my investigation, that person is called Yang Qinglin, a person from more than 14,000 years ago. Although he wasn't the founder of the Blood Divine sect, he was once the most dazzling genius of the Blood Divine sect. However, he was schemed against by an enemy sect and died's death. But I don't know what method he used. He actually came back to life after 14,000 years. Lin Yuan was silent. Even a demon of the Desolate Demon Realm like the Fire Kirin had the method of resurrection, let alone a being from 14,000 years ago whose cultivation was 2 realms higher than the Kongming realm. Don't think that he was easy to bully just because he was reincarnated. After this old thing mastered the method of resurrection in his previous life, he had set up many backup plans and trump cards for himself. He was definitely a tough nut to crack. Yang Qinglin wants to meet me. What do you think he wants to do? Lin Yuan's eyes widened a little, revealing a dignified aura. He knew even less about the Blood Divine sect, which wasn't ranked in the northern frontier and had been around for longer than the Qiao family. It wasn't easy to find someone who knew about it, so naturally, he had to ask. "This," Ding Zai frowned and pondered for a moment, then slowly said, "I heard that the Blood Divine sect has a secret method that can absorb the blood of living creatures to improve one's cultivation. Although it is suspected of pulling up seedlings to help them grow, whether it's from the Heavenly Dipper realm to the Kongming realm or from the Kongming realm to the Tao, the threshold is not easy to cross. I guess that this Yang Qinglin is not confident that he can cultivate to the Supreme Realm by himself, so he wants to use this method to help himself break through." When Lin Yuan read novels in his previous life, he often saw some strong people reincarnating and recultivating, and easily entering the realm of their previous life. However, in reality, this was not the case. The method of reincarnation and recultivation was heaven-defying, so how could there not be any restrictions? When an immortal reincarnated, there was still a period of dust. If one didn't work hard to cultivate, or if there was a friend from his previous life to guide him, even an immortal would fall into the mortal world and become an ordinary person. Therefore, even if one reached the immortal realm, reincarnation and recultivation was a gamble. The slightest carelessness would cause all the hard work to vanish. Moreover, the supreme realm of the Tianwu continent might not necessarily be inferior to the immortals that Lin Yuan knew. So, he wants to get permission from this king to let him use the blood sacrifice of the people of the northern frontier to break through? Lin Yuan's multicolored eyes flashed with a cold light, causing Ding Zai, who was standing opposite to him, to break out in cold sweat. At this moment, Lin Yuan was really too terrifying. Ding Zai did not doubt that in the next moment, Lin Yuan would suddenly explode, turning into a ferocious beast that would swallow him whole. After 4 to 5 breaths of time, Lin Yuan finally calmed down the surging anger in his heart and said in a deep voice, "Although the power behind you has not shown any goodwill to this king, but compared to the other families, you have not done anything hostile to this king. Therefore, this king will consider giving you a chance. Perhaps in the near future, our two families can join hands." If it was any other person who said this, Ding Zai would definitely scoff. But when these words came from Lin Yuan's mouth, there was no element of boasting. After all, the secrets on Lin Yuan's body were not known even by the big shots behind him. They could only believe that Lin Yuan was indeed the reincarnation of some ancient demon. However, there were also many people who had divined Lin Yuan's origins. It was just that none of those big shots were willing to reveal Lin Yuan's origins. Instead, it made Lin Yuan even more mysterious. Moreover, putting aside the secrets on Lin Yuan's body, just based on the speed of cultivation, Lin Yuan was also a monstrous genius. In less than a year and a half, he had cultivated from a wild beast to a mountain lord. This kind of cultivation speed, not to mention ordinary people, even young Qing Lin, who had reincarnated with his previous life's memories, was far from comparable. If he was given a period of time, how far would he be from those big shots? But Ding Zai did not directly agree, because he was very clear that there was no free lunch in this world. Previously, he had covered the eyes of the Demon Emperor Association and wanted young Qing Lin to kill Lin Yuan. According to Lin Yuan's personality, he would have already been sentenced to death. But at this moment, not only did Lin Yuan not pursue the matter, he even showed goodwill. Therefore, Ding Zai was very clear that Lin Yuan should have taken a fancy to him, or the help that the organization behind him could provide. Chapter 4:10. Don't look at me like that. This king isn't a fool. He knows you won't attack him directly, but revealing some information should be within the scope of your ability, right? Lin Yuan looked at Ding Zai with a mocking gaze. Obviously, he had seen through Ding Zai's little thoughts. But thinking about it, although Lin Yuan's current strength was not enough, his cultivation speed was there. In addition, the northern frontier was currently a hot new force. For those big shots, hundreds of years was not a long time. As long as Lin Yuan was willing to become their ally, they had plenty of time to wait for Lin Yuan to grow up and give some help to Lin Yuan in advance. Even Lin Yuan himself could not think of any way to refuse such a temptation. The quadripartite group sent a supreme cultivator, nicknamed Kong Lezin. He can be considered as a flag-bearer of the new generation of the quadripartite group. I don't have much information about him. After all, those who have seen him in action are all dead. There are only rumors that this Kong Lezin cultivates an ancient inheritance and is extremely proficient in divination. To him, misfortune and fortune can be seen with a single thought. I heard that the Fire Kirin was sent here by the quadripartite group with the intention of replacing the Beast Lord Kirin as the Beast Lord of the Hengduan Mountains. However, the Fire Kirin did not fight the Beast Lord Kirin and found a hidden place to hide in the periphery of the Hengduan Mountains. However, it still has a supreme treasure that belongs to the quadripartite group. This time, Kong Lezin came to the northern frontier to retrieve this treasure. Therefore, this subordinate boldly speculates that the Shifter Emperor should soon meet this Kong Lezin. After all, you came to Shunning City with the Fire Kirin. Now that the Fire Kirin is dead, its treasures are most likely to fall into your hands. Ding Zai licked his lips and felt that his throat was a little dry. After all, with Kong Lezin's rumored abilities, he had probably deduced that Ding Zai had been betrayed. Although it was impossible for him to know the specific conversation between Ding Zai and Lin Yuan, it was not difficult for him to see the scene of Ding Zai talking to Lin Yuan. Therefore, Ding Zai had taken a big risk by revealing Kong Lezin's identity. Although Shanglu Association and Four United Gang were on the same level, Kong Lezin couldn't possibly not give them face. However, Ding Zai and Kong Lezin weren't on the same level. If Kong Lezin wanted to vent his anger on him, Shanglu Association wouldn't be able to protect him. Now, he could only hope that Lin Yuan was really that valuable in the eyes of those big shots. This way, he could rope in Lin Yuan as a future ally. Only then would those big shots personally speak up to protect him, lest he become a sacrifice. Another thing is news about Yang Qinglin. Although this guy is a figure from 14,000 years ago, there are quite a lot of records about him. It is said that Yang Qinglin was extremely ferocious when he was young. Not to mention provoking him, even if he didn't like you, he would think of ways to make you pay a painful price. Therefore, the Shifter Emperor didn't agree to meet Yang Qinglin previously. You even secretly captured Old Demon Blood Sea. If Yang Qinglin knew about this, I'm afraid he would hate the Shifter Emperor to death. It is even possible that he would personally take action. Since he had decided to unite with Lin Yuan, Ding Zai immediately became a lackey. However, at this point, Ding Zai helplessly spread out his hands and said bitterly, "To be honest, the Shifter Emperor, this subordinate has already sent someone to inform Yang Qinglin of your situation. Therefore, this subordinate guesses that he can't wait to skin you alive." Lin Yuan. It was not terrible to be targeted by a cultivator who had just entered the Heaven Gang realm. In Lin Yuan's opinion, there was no difference between a cultivator of this realm and him being an enemy and giving him attribute points. However, his opponent had changed from a novice who had just entered the Heaven Gang realm to an old devil who had left many trump cards for himself before reincarnating. This made Lin Yuan unhappy at all. However, Ding Zai's information was indeed terrifying. Not many people knew that he had secretly captured Old Demon Blood Sea. The one who was most likely to sell him out to Ding Zai should be Wine Sword Mystery, who had left in a hurry. However, Wine Sword Mystery had no reason to do so because Ding Zai could be considered to be the one who had single-handedly orchestrated the destruction of the Jiao clan's remnants. Although there were still traces of the Jiao clan's remnants in various parts of the Xinwu dynasty, the northern frontier was the border of the Xinwu dynasty and coincidentally near the Hengduan mountain range. Naturally, the Jiao clan's remnants would treat it as their base camp. Therefore, almost all the survivors of the Jiao clan gathered at the northern frontier. First, they were suppressed by the Shifter Emperor Association. Then, they lost contact with the Hengduan mountain range. Then, under the control of Ding Zai and the Shanglu Association, the Jiao clan's remnants had completely offended the Shifter Emperor Association. Those who didn't retreat from the northern frontier in time were all killed by the members of the Shifter Emperor Association. Those fellows in other regions were only having fun now. Once their resources were exhausted, it would only be a matter of time before they were completely wiped out. Wine Sword Mystery might not be interested in reviving the Jiao clan, but this didn't mean that he could tolerate others wantonly slaughtering his own clansmen. It was even more impossible for him to tolerate Ding Zai, the main culprit who had caused the Jiao clan's remnants to end up in such a state. If Wine Sword Mystery knew Ding Zai's identity, it wasn't impossible for him to draw his sword and kill Ding Zai. Lord Shifter Emperor need not worry too much. Ding Zai stretched out his hand and touched his nose. He smiled and said, "Your subordinate doesn't need any information. As long as I know the general situation, I can piece together some clues. Then, I can gather all these clues and know the result. Although it's not accurate, it's not far from it." Lin Yuan was once again choked by Ding Zai's words. But thinking about it, if Ding Zai's associative ability wasn't so rich, he wouldn't have been able to secretly plan a killing move against the Shifter Emperor Association and Lin Yuan under Lin Yuan's careful planning. Although it was all broken by Lin Yuan and his identity was exposed, it was still much better than Lei Fan, who took advantage of Lin Yuan's absence to act recklessly. However, according to your subordinate's reliable information, when Kong Lezin just entered Shunning City, for some unknown reason, he suddenly changed his calm and collected manner. It is said that several inns in Shunning City were smashed by Kong Lezin. Your subordinate guesses that Kong Lezin must have had a conflict with Yang Qinglin or some other existence, and even suffered a loss. As Ding Zai spoke, he once again spread out his hands and said, "Now, what Lord Shifter Emperor should be dealing with is not Yang Qinglin, but Hu Yan. As far as I know, Hu Yan is extremely dissatisfied with your action of attacking the northern frontier families. He tried to persuade you but to no avail. He simply fell out with Li Zhong." At this time, He should have already begun to deal with Li Zhong. Yes, I know. Lin Yuan nodded slightly, but there wasn't the slightest ripple in his different-colored eyes. Chapter 4:11. Undercurrents were surging under the northern frontier. On the surface, Hu Yan and Li Zhong were fighting. In the dark, the Shanglu Association, the Demon Emperor Association, the Four United Group, and even Yang Qinglin of the Divine Blood Sect were secretly plotting to get what they wanted. However, the Xinwu dynasty was not as peaceful as the northern frontier. Lei Qiusheng, who had been silent for nearly half a year, changed his declining trend. Shen Linjun, who had been hiding for years and only had the reputation of being an elite, brazenly moved out. In the first battle they showed their edge to the world. 300,000 miles to the south of the imperial city, the rebel army formed by the big clans, even if there were dozens of times more than Shen Linjun, was destroyed in a face-to-face confrontation. Hearing about the war in the south, millions of miles to the north of the imperial city were in a state of panic. Because of the existence of the northern frontier, not many people dared to rebel. After all, Lin Yuan chose to live with the light and dust when he was at his peak. No one knew what kind of secret agreement Lin Yuan had with Lei Qiusheng. They were all worried that they would be attacked by the Xinwu dynasty and the northern frontier if they took advantage of the chaos to raise their troops. Almost overnight, the situation changed drastically. All the rebel armies to the north of the imperial city either disbanded on the spot or fled at the sight of the wind. Those who usually boasted of being famous generals and ambitious people were scared witless. There was no lack of existences who went to the imperial city alone to confess to Lei Qiusheng. However, these people were too stupid. Although Lin Yuan took the opportunity to control the northern frontier first, he chose to be silent when the Xinwu dynasty was at its most chaotic instead of adding insult to injury. This would help Lei Qiusheng stabilize the situation as much as possible. Therefore, even if Lei Qiusheng was dissatisfied, he would not really fall out with Lin Yuan. Naturally, he would give the territory and try to satisfy Lin Yuan's conditions. Surrendering when you had a chance of winning and surrendering when you were forced into a corner were two different things. Therefore, most of the people who ran over to Lei Qiusheng out of fear and didn't know what to do had a good ending. Although Shen Linjun had not yet covered the southern coastal region, the monsters under the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had all ceased their activities. Back then, when Lei Qiusheng was sweeping the lands for the Wanjian dynasty, many demonic beasts from the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had suffered losses at his hands. Now that Lei Qiusheng had changed his previous dejected appearance and directly sent out troops to sweep the lands, even those who did not know the cause of the chaos in the Xinwu dynasty could guess that Lei Qiusheng had probably solved the problem at hand and was about to settle the score. Not long ago, the world was still in chaos. However, the moment Lei Qiusheng made his move, the direction of the situation immediately changed. Some busybodies also specially analyzed the current situation. The chaos in the Xinwu dynasty would last for no more than 3 years. Now, only Lin Yuan, Qing Peng Lei Qiuming, Frost Mirror Mahamu, and Qing Jiang Sun Qianfan had the ability to wrestle with Lei Qiusheng at the northern frontier. They had both internal and external troubles. Except for these 4 forces, the rest of the rebel forces were just chickens and pottery dogs to Lei Qiusheng. At the same time, northern frontier, Shunning City's military camp. Lin Yuan straightened his body. His gaze fell on the 200,000 soldiers of the southern expedition, who were performing martial arts on the drill ground. His heterochromatic eyes revealed a cold color. Although the 3 million soldiers of the southern expedition had not yet expanded to the point of being fully staffed, they had 3 million soldiers. Moreover, these soldiers who were recruited to the southern expedition were originally people who were unwilling to work in the northern frontier to support themselves. They were ruffians and scoundrels who spent all day on the streets. Now, under Li Zhongxing's command, they already had the shadow of a strong army. I didn't know that Lord Dragon King would come in person. Please excuse me for not going out to meet you. Li Zhongxing, who was wearing a silver-white armor, strode to Lin Yuan with 2 of his personal guards. He knelt on one knee and cupped his fists. Although Li Zhongxing's temperament was relatively simple, as a military seedling selected by Shen Linjun, he was obviously not a kind person. After learning from Luo Su for a period of time, although Li Zhongxing was not as intolerant as before, he also maintained a tacit attitude towards some of the unspoken rules. He was clear in his rewards and punishments, and was cautious in his private matters. he could be considered a qualified commander. Especially after the incident with Lei Fan, although Li Zhongxing was wholeheartedly immersed in the military camp, he was no longer as ignorant as before about the situation in the northern frontier. He was very clear that Lin Yuan usually either cultivated near the demonic beast forest, or directly went to the northern frontier prince's mansion to explain some details and changes of the new policy. He would not stroll around. Therefore, when he knew that Lin Yuan appeared in the southern battlefront army's military camp, Li Zhongxing put down the things at hand and hurried over. Li Zhongxing. Lin Yuan was still looking at the soldiers who were performing martial arts on the drill ground. This general is here. Li Zhongxing cupped his fists again and replied in a deep voice. I order you to lead the soldiers under your command out of Shunning Pass and clean up the rebels in the south. Return a peaceful land to the Shenwu dynasty. Lin Yuan's voice was very calm, as if he was just talking about a trivial matter. Li Zhongxing's body trembled as he looked at Lin Yuan's back in disbelief. Although they were far apart and even the Council of the Demon Emperor did not have any definite information, but now that the Shenwu dynasty had sent out troops to clean up the south, the news of the rebels fleeing at the mere sight of them was definitely not groundless. As the largest branch of the rebels, Lin Yuan was definitely not stupid enough to not be able to distinguish who was his enemy, and naively think that his position was stable after the Shenwu dynasty had conferred him a title. At this time, he was sending troops to the south to clean up the rebels. Could it be? It's as you think. This king wants to seize territory. If we don't seize this opportunity to seize territory, when the Shenwu dynasty stabilizes, we won't have enough trump cards to fall out with Lei Qiuxing. Secondly, even if Lei Qiuxing is afraid of us and won't do anything to us, he won't give us a chance to continue growing. Lin Yuan's voice was still calm. He just smiled and said, after this battle, I want to be the real king of the northern frontier. This general naturally understands the Dragon King's intention, but the soldiers under this general's command. Li Zhongxing looked worriedly at the soldiers practicing martial arts on the drill ground. A trace of hesitation flashed across his eyes. Lin Yuan wanted the most remote northern frontier, the northern part of the Shenwu dynasty. Before he saw the big river called Wei River that separated the imperial city from the north, he and his soldiers could not stop. A mere 3 million soldiers would definitely not be able to take over such a large territory and wipe out the rebels north of the Shenwu dynasty's imperial city. If the soldiers aren't good, then train them as you fight. If the soldiers aren't good enough, then recruit them as you fight. If you don't have enough soldiers, don't you still have the surrendered troops? Lin Yuan raised his eyelids and sneered. Don't tell me that you, Xin Lin Jun's reserve military officer, aren't as good at training soldiers as a bunch of temporary flower frames. Chapter 4:12. Lord Dragon King, do you trust me? Li Zhongxing's eyes widened as he stared at Lin Yuan, who had suddenly changed. He did not bother to hide the doubt in his eyes. Lei Fan was an existence that could be used in any position, but because of the matter of overstepping his authority, he was taken down by Lin Yuan. In the end, his corpse was hung at the mountain gate by the sect of the Blood God. For a general like him who only knew how to lead troops into battle, his position in Lin Yuan's heart naturally could not be compared to those all-rounders. Furthermore, this trip meant that he would be setting up his own territory. Even though the southern expedition had 3 million troops, once the battle was over, it was not impossible for him to have tens of millions of troops under his command. With so many soldiers and horses in his hands, as long as he has any little idea, it is enough to be a fatal blow to Lin Yuan. Furthermore, even if he did not have any thoughts that he should not have, so what? He was not some peerless general that only appeared once in 1,000 years. It was impossible for him to command tens of millions of troops as he wished. When the time came that Lin Yuan wished for, he could not even guarantee that all of his troops would abide by the rules. Furthermore, what about those troops who had surrendered to him because of their defeat? After being silent for a long time, Li Zhongxing still did not get a reply from Lin Yuan. When he raised his head again, he realized that Lin Yuan had left the stage. Army Commander, can't you tell? Lord Dragon King, he is asking you to vacate your position. One of the 2 personal guards that Li Zhongxing brought along stroked his beard. A light flashed in his eyes as he said in a deep voice, the demonic beasts live in peace with the northern frontier. Therefore, the northern frontier does not need many troops now. 1 northern army is enough. Our southern expedition's establishment from the beginning was to scare some people in the south. Our initial goal has been achieved. Now that we are in need again, we will naturally play other roles. You mean? Li Zhongxing was reminded by his personal guard. He suddenly understood Lin Yuan's meaning. Of course, one of Lin Yuan's starting points was to seize territory, but the most important thing was to allow the southern expedition to set out and free up the camp to train another army. Recently, Lin Yuan had no intention to expand the army. Therefore, the new army that was about to occupy the southern expedition camp was only Li Zhong's Fallen Star army. In the northern frontier, Lord Li Zhong, the big shot who promoted the land reform, had the support of Lin Yuan and the elusive Yan Xingqi. Even in the Shenwu dynasty, there were many arrogant soldiers and generals from the Fallen Star army who were willing to help them. The starting point of this new army was much higher than theirs from the beginning. Isn't this too ridiculous? Li Zhongxing clenched his fists. His eyes were burning with anger. He said in a deep voice, "What does this Lin Yuan think the king of the northern frontier is?" After all, Li Zhongxing was born in the Xin Lin June. Other than the daily training and military lessons, what he received the most was the loyalty that the instructors instilled in him. Therefore, Li Zhongxing and Zhang Qilin's generation were undoubtedly loyal to Lei Qiusheng. However, before they came to the northern frontier, they were ordered to be absolutely loyal to Lei Fan. After seeing the changes here, they felt that the path that Lin Yuan was taking was the right one. Moreover, with the imperial edict of the Shenwu dynasty, they suppressed the dissatisfaction in their hearts. However, there was a limit to how much they could tolerate Lin Yuan. Now that Lei Fan had passed away and the northern frontier was on the right track, the first thing that Lin Yuan did was to get rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness. He wanted to completely destroy the influence that the three words King of the Northern Frontier had on the northern frontier. What difference was there between such an action and tearing off the last piece of cloth that the empire was using? The personal guard who had spoken to advise Li Zhongxing quickly stepped forward and pressed down on Li Zhongxing's shoulder. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. Lowering his voice, he said, "Army commander, you can't do that. You should know the personality of that black Jiao. Once it has decided on something, it will not change its mind. If you plead for Hu Yan now, not only will you not be able to save Hu Yan, you will also be sacrificing yourself." Furthermore, hearing the personal guard's hesitation, Li Zhongxing frowned slightly and asked, "Furthermore what? This is my military camp. There won't be any spies from the Association of the Demon Emperor. If you have anything to say, just say it. Furthermore, that bastard Hu Yan has indeed gone a little overboard. Regarding the land reform in the northern frontier, even this subordinate feels that this is a good thing that will benefit the future. Without the control of the aristocratic families, the yearly income of the imperial residents will increase. With enough money and food, the imperial residents will be able to continue developing more land and provide for more people, making the entire northern frontier better and better. If the Black Jiao's policy can be implemented in the entire Shenwu dynasty, then after 2 or 3 generations, our Shenwu dynasty's national strength will definitely surpass the other 6 dynasties. Even if they pull in the Hengduan mountain range's demonic beasts, they won't be able to surpass us in economic and military strength. As the king of the northern frontier, Hu Yan must have seen this clearly. Otherwise, he wouldn't have agreed to implement the Black Jiao's new policy. However, although Hu Yan said so, he did something else. This subordinate heard that on the first day Li Zhong took office, Hu Yan wanted to hold a banquet and invite Li Zhong to introduce him to the masters of the aristocratic families. His purpose was to delay or even not implement this new policy. The personal guard bowed slightly with killing intent in his eyes. He said coldly, "That Black Jiao, as a demonic beast, still knows to seek benefits for the people of the northern frontier. As the king of the northern frontier, Hu Yan only cares about the petty benefits of the aristocratic families. Based on this, Hu Yan deserves to die." But Li Zhongxing opened his mouth, but his momentum weakened a bit. He said in a low voice, "I'm not talking about whether Hu Yan is right or wrong. Right now, the control of the northern frontier is getting weaker and weaker. If the Legion commander argues with the Black Jiao because of Hu Yan, it will only cause the Legion commander to be involved in this whirlpool. It won't do us any good. It's better to stay alive and wait for the Emperor's army to go north." Li Zhongxing crossed his arms in front of his chest and thought carefully for a moment. Suddenly, he shook his head and said helplessly, "Do you think that the Black Jiao will let go of us who are loyal to the Shenwu dynasty at this point? In any case, Hu Yan is still thinking about the benefits of his family. Wait. In the eyes of the Black Jiao, we are just a threat from the beginning to the end. I even think that the Black Jiao asked me to lead the troops to go south this time just to get rid of me." The personal guard was silent for a moment, then he raised his head and said, "Legion Commander, this is indeed a crisis. With our ability, it's already hard for us to restrain the southern expedition. If we expand the battlefront to the whole north, it's already a blessing that the troops under our command don't take the opportunity to rebel. Therefore, whether we do well or not, the Black Jiao has a reason to punish us. But, speaking of this, the personal guard changed the topic and sneered, "Isn't this also an opportunity?" Chapter 413. In the courtyard of the Hu family in Shunning City. Hu Yan was pacing back and forth in the courtyard with his hands behind his back. He was looking at the ground with a gloomy look, as if he was thinking about something. "Uncle, something went wrong in the southern expedition. Many quartermasters left the camp and are buying all kinds of supplies." A young man of the Hu family in a blue silk robe walked into the courtyard and said in a deep voice, "I was confused, so I went to ask some quartermasters who I had a good relationship with. I didn't expect them to tell me that the southern expedition would set out in a few days under the order of Dragon King His Majesty. The initial strategic goal is to wipe out the remaining rebels near the northern frontier." Hu Yan suddenly raised his head. His face, which was already clouded, became so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. Hu Yan could fight with Li Zhong until now not because of the support of the aristocratic families, but because of the guards of the prince's mansion that he had trained. They blocked the Fallen Star Army and the Secretariat office under Li Zhong's command at every checkpoint with the absolute advantage in numbers. That was how he managed to keep the situation where the aristocratic families still controlled a lot of land. But Hu Yan was clear that it was not a long-term solution. It was getting closer and closer to the day when the two sides completely fell out. Hu Yan could only rely on those who were loyal to the Shenwu dynasty. Luo Su, the traitor, was not an extravagant hope. But Zhang Qilin and Li Zhongxing, the two corps commanders who controlled the northern frontier army, were Hu Yan's primary targets. Although Zhang Qilin had Xin Lin Jun as his subordinates, most of the northern battlefront army were from the northern frontier. If they were to be enemies with Lin Yuan, Hu Yan would be beheaded by Zhang Qilin as soon as Zhang Qilin gave the order. So what Hu Yan could really rely on was the southern expedition under Li Zhongxing's command. Because the skeleton of this army was made up of the reserves of Shen Lin Jun that Li Zhongxing brought to the northern frontier. Even though there were many officers in the northern frontier, those who were recruited later were basically ruffians or refugees who didn't want to earn a living by working. Compared with the northern battlefront army, the possibility of the southern expedition rebelling against Lin Yuan was obviously higher. But obviously, he was not the only one who thought of this. Otherwise, Lin Yuan would not directly transfer the southern expedition out of the northern frontier. What did Li Zhongxing say? Did he accept the transfer order? Hu Yan was a little emotional as he grabbed his nephew's shoulder and asked loudly. Hu Yan obviously didn't expect his uncle to have such a big reaction when he heard the news. He smiled bitterly and said, "Uncle, do you know that Dragon King has become a real god in the hearts of the northern frontier people? Ever since Dragon King took over the northern frontier, the aristocratic families and sects have been eating all they can. Now, he has finally started to bring benefits to the people at the bottom. Do you know how those who refuse to carry out Dragon King's orders will be scolded if they don't carry out Dragon King's orders smoothly?" At this point, the young man of the Hu family spread out his hands and said helplessly, "I have already sent someone to inquire. The officers of the Southern Expedition Army have no way to refuse the Dragon King's order. They also asked me to come back and ask Uncle if Uncle has any way to stop the Southern Expedition Army from going to war. They will prepare generous gifts to thank Uncle." Bang! Hu Yan let go of his nephew and heavily punched the courtyard wall next to him. The thick wall immediately spread out a large area of cracks like a spider web. He originally thought that Lin Yuan didn't have any intention of denouncing him for such a long time, because he didn't intend to interfere in the battle between him and Li Zhongxing. However, just as he thought of seeking outside help, Lin Yuan directly took drastic measures and transferred the southern expedition away. He couldn't even take advantage of the situation. Li Zhongxing, that little thief, knows how to play safe. He has dug a pit for me. Hu Yan roared with scarlet eyes. If Li Zhongxing took the southern expedition away from the northern frontier, it meant that he had left the supervision of the Association of the Demon Emperor and Lin Yuan. As the saying goes, a general can't obey the emperor's orders when he is outside. Even if Li Zhongxing took his people to the Xinwu dynasty, Lin Yuan couldn't do anything to him. However, as the king of the northern region, he was ordered not to let his guards step out of Shunning City. He could go out by himself, but once he left Shunning City, which was still safe for now, who knew what those madmen from the Fallen Star Army would do to him, the king of the northern region in name but not in reality? Where is the champion of the Fallen Star Army, General Gao? Suddenly, a thunderous voice exploded in the sky. Hu Yan raised his head subconsciously, only to see the famous vice president of the Association of the Demon Emperor, Ding Zai, floating in the air, looking down at Shunning City with his hands behind his back. Hu Yan's heart sank again. After all, before this, Ding Zai had always presented himself as a trash. No matter how hard he cultivated, Ding Zai's talent in cultivation was too poor. But now, Ding Zai was floating in the air without any signs of strain. This was enough to show that Ding Zai's cultivation was at least at the Heaven Dipper realm. I'm here. A muffled voice suddenly came from the villa belonging to Li Zhong in the northern frontier palace. Then, a burly figure like a titan shot out from the villa and rushed to Ding Zai in the air. Under the order of the Dragon King, the Northern Frontier Army will set off soon. The empty camp will be handed over to your Fallen Star Army to manage. As long as it doesn't affect the development of the Northern Frontier, you can recruit as many soldiers as you want. This is the decree of the Dragon King. Take it to the King of the Northern Frontier and print it. Then, go to the camp outside the city to report. Ding Zai calmly handed over a white piece of paper to Gao Buzhen. Then, he turned around and disappeared from the sky above Shunning City, as if he had never appeared. Congratulations, uncle. The Fallen Star Army has been transferred away from Li Zhong by the Dragon King. For uncle, this is great news. The disciple of the Hu family cupped his fists to Hu Yan and sneered. Without the help of the Fallen Star Army, Li Zhong is just a weak scholar no matter how powerful he is. By then, I have many ways to stop Li Zhong's order from going out of Shunning City. Bastard! Hu Yan suddenly growled and said coldly. You know, this time, the Dragon King is seeking benefits for the people. We just delayed Li Zhong's order, but there are already people complaining about the Northern Frontier Palace. If Li Zhong's order can't even go out of Shunning City, will the people be angry? Will the Dragon King punish us? Aren't you giving them a reason to kill me? Use your brain before you speak. Chapter 4:14. Yes, Lord Uncle. The Hu clan disciple covered his face and took a deep breath. His eyes suddenly flashed with a cold light, and he suggested again, since we can't stop Li Zhong's decree, then we have to think of a way to kill Li Zhong. Now that the land reform has begun to be implemented in various places, even if Lord Dragon King personally says it, those people won't be willing to give up halfway. So once Li Zhong dies, Lord Dragon King can only let Lord Uncle take full responsibility for this matter in a short period of time. At that time, Pa! This time, the Hu clan disciple's response was not Hu Yan's angry roar, but a loud slap. Then your uncle, I, will be pushed from being the support and leader of countless aristocratic families in the northern frontier to being the enemy of the aristocratic families in an instant. Not to mention whether Lord Dragon King has other backup plans after Li Zhong's death. Even if he doesn't have any preparations and can only leave this matter to me, do you think he won't supervise me and let me do whatever I want? Moreover, Li Zhong inexplicably died in the northern frontier prince's mansion. Do you believe that when this matter is settled, the Hu clan will die the same way as Li Zhong died? Hu Yan took a deep breath. Although he had long known that the Hu clan's juniors were good-for-nothings, he really didn't expect that at this time, the Hu clan's juniors still didn't realize the seriousness of the problem. They thought that if they were in Li Zhong's position, they could do whatever they wanted just like before, and even change the order from day to night. Then, Lord Uncle's meaning is? After the Hu clan disciple was beaten, he also knew that his smarts had completely angered the fetters. Originally, he wanted to show off his abilities, but now, he could only cover his face and stand beside Hu Yan with a wronged expression, carefully asking a question. Hu Yan took a deep breath, narrowed his eyes, and said, the situation has already reached this point. No matter what we think, Li Zhong won't let this matter rest. I admit that the annual income of the Northern Frontier's farmland added together can't compare to the several large contracts we have in the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. However, the land is the foundation of our aristocratic family's existence. Without the land, the aristocratic families are just a group of worms that can be bullied by others. Hu Yan had some more words that he couldn't say in person. If the Northern Frontier aristocratic family's juniors were all talents like the Chao clan's juniors, Hu Yan wouldn't be so opposed to the reform of the Northern Frontier aristocratic families. However, Hu Yan had seen the performance of his nephews. It was fine if he was alive, but once his generation of Hu clan members died, his juniors would be sensible if they didn't cause the Hu clan to be ruined. Although the annual income from the land wasn't much, as the Northern Frontier's territory grew larger, this income would not only remain unchanged, but would also increase. If they could stop Lin Yuan's land reform plan, no matter how bad the Hu clan's juniors were, they could still survive for 4 or 5 more generations. If they could produce 1 or 2 more Kirin, the Hu clan might be able to avoid the fate of being ruined. Relying on this group of juniors to beg for food in the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce? It would be better to hope that money would fall from the sky. After thinking for a moment, Hu Yan slowly said, "Go to all the aristocratic families and tell them that I will be hosting a banquet in the Hu clan tonight. I invite all the family heads to come." The ability of the royal guards was only useful in Shunning City. Now that the southern expedition was about to set off, if Hu Yan didn't make a last stand before Li Zhongxing left, she would have no chance at all. Yes. The Hu clan's juniors cupped their fists at Hu Yan and responded with a heavy voice. At the same time, outside the Hu clan, Xiaofan curled his lips proudly and said to Xiaofan, "See? I told you that Hu Yan wouldn't wait for his death when he has completely lost the ability to resist." He must be asking his descendants to inform the patriarchs of the various aristocratic families to gather at the Hu residence and join forces to put pressure on the demon emperor. Xiaofan's face remained cold as he stared expressionlessly at the Hu clan disciples who were gradually disappearing into the distance. After a long while, a cold glint flashed across his eagle-like eyes as he asked, "Kill them? What's the point of killing him? It's a waste of time and useless." Xiaofan waved his right hand, and a heavy black money bag appeared in his hand. He said with a smile, "If you agree to a bet, you must accept your loss. This is what you lost to me." "Don't kill him? Then why did you call us here?" Xiaofan narrowed his eyes slightly and turned his head to look at Xiaofan beside him, a dangerous cold light flashing in his eyes. Since joining Lin Yuan's forces, the lives of the demi-humans had indeed improved a lot. After all, the forces under Lin Yuan's command were a mix of good and bad. There were demon beasts, humans, and demi-humans. Compared to humans, the demon beasts in the Hengduan mountain range were more likely to accept these demi-humans. Therefore, during this period of time, the demi-humans could finally raise their heads in the Hengduan mountain range. It was many times better than the previous situation where they were hated by both gods and demons. Of course, to guard against civil unrest in Shunning City. Xiaofan still didn't look serious, but looking at the direction where the Hu clan's disciples had disappeared, his eyes revealed a playful look. Some people were on the chessboard from the beginning. No matter how they struggled, they couldn't escape the fate of being a chess piece. After all, not everyone was qualified to be a chess player. Even a ruthless person like Lei Fan only dared to have some bold ideas about the power of the northern frontier when Lin Yuan was in danger. The head of the Hu clan was really strong-willed. He had just learned a lesson from Hu Yan, but when it was his turn, he dared to go against Lin Yuan for a little benefit. Tonight would be the end of this show. Those heads of the aristocratic families who had rushed to Shunning City from all over the northern frontier to wait for the news could still keep their lives if they didn't go to the Hu clan tonight. But if they went to the Hu clan, we're leaving too. The men of the northern army stationed near Shunning City alone can't handle tonight's big show. Xiaofan whistled, and 7 or 8 figures disappeared in a flash, hiding in the darkness. When these hidden sentries disappeared, Li Zhong, who was dressed in white, walked to the side of the two. His clear eyes were cold and sharp as he said, "Some people are always above the people and think that they are the power. Tonight, I will show these idiots what real power is." "Mr. Li! Mr. Li!" Xiaofan and Xiaofan cupped their fists at Li Zhong at the same time. Although they didn't know what was so great about this young man in white, but to be entrusted with such an important task by the Demon Emperor, he must be outstanding in some aspects. Thinking of the arrangement tonight, Xia Siyu, who knew some inside information, felt his hair stand on end. Chapter 4:15. It was night. The heads of the aristocratic families from all over the northern frontier gathered in the Hu mansion. They looked at the luxurious dishes on the table, but not a single guest picked up their chopsticks. Almost everyone looked at Hu Yan, who was sitting on the main seat. They wanted to hear what the king of the northern frontier, who was in the camp of the northern frontier prince, had to say. Hu Yan put a piece of fresh fish into his mouth and chewed for a moment. Then he wiped his mouth and said in a deep voice, "You have come from afar. As the king of the northern frontier, I have not done my duty as a host. It is a sin. Today, I have prepared some wine to welcome you." After he finished speaking, the hall was still silent. Everyone fixed their eyes on Hu Yan. They came to the northern frontier to ask for accurate information. There had to be an explanation about the northern frontier prince's mansion attacking them. "King of the northern frontier, you know better than anyone why we are gathered here. Don't play tricks. If you think you can send us home by talking, I advise you to go to bed early. You can have anything in your dreams." The one who spoke was a middle-aged man around the age of 40. His skin was dark, and his forehead was full. He didn't look like the patriarch of an aristocratic family that lived like a prince. Instead, he looked like a valiant general that often fought on the battlefield. Especially his muscles that couldn't be hidden by his luxurious brocade robe. It was enough to make some women who were like wolves and tigers stare at him for a long time. Hu Yan nodded slightly and said with narrowed eyes, "Of course I know why you have come to Shunning City. But if I say that I can send you away by talking, I may be telling the truth. Let me ask you, how many of you have made up your mind to fall out with the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion and dare to take the risk of angering the Dragon King to deal with Li Zhong?" After Hu Yan finished speaking, the audience started to talk. Everyone was whispering, but no one dared to answer Hu Yan's question. Why did they dare to come to Shunning City to ask for information after the prince's mansion at the northern frontier began to clear the land? Why did they even obstruct and bribe the secretaries and guards who were sent out by Li Zhong? This was because Lin Yuan had no intention of killing these aristocratic families. The aristocratic families were at loggerheads with the northern frontier prince's residence on the issue of land. This was mainly because they had been thinking of ways to reduce the dynasty's income to fill their own pockets for so many years. They didn't have the right to speak in the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. Even though he had become the president, Lin Yuan had the final say on how many feis the Hengduan mountain range would be allocated every day. When the various caravans left the Shunning Pass, they would still have the final say on how many things they could bring and how much tax they had to pay. Although the degree of freedom was extremely low, the aristocratic families were still willing to endure the northern frontier's fey trade. However, the issue of land was more sensitive because after losing these lands, the aristocratic family's annual fixed income would decrease. It was still fine for the aristocratic families that raised many serfs, but for the aristocratic families that didn't raise serfs, they had to keep their own cultivated land. If the land was abandoned, they would have to pay taxes to the northern frontier prince's residence every year. After all, this was the aristocratic family's obligation and the foundation of their survival. Otherwise, how could the various dynasties allow the aristocratic families to exist like local emperors? Wasn't it because they could organize the farmers to cultivate and not waste a large amount of land? But now, the northern frontier prince's residence was just fooling around. First, they took drastic measures to get all the farmers to cultivate in the new gathering land. After clearing out the land, the aristocratic families would have to pay taxes. They couldn't possibly point at their own fertile land and say that it was all wasteland, right? They could either pinch their noses and admit defeat and pay taxes to the northern frontier prince's residence every year when there was no income from the cultivated land, or they could be honest and hand over their land to the northern frontier prince's residence. Although they could earn a lot of wealth through the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, it wasn't a long-term solution. Not every aristocratic family was like the Chow clan and had strict requirements for their descendants. Those young masters and young ladies in their families were not all good-for-nothings, but if they were really forced to do business, they would at least have to be prepared to lose everything for a few years. Only after they had suffered enough losses could they be considered qualified businessmen. Look, all of you are mute. I know that all of you are just angry, so you want to gather in Shunning City and see if you can put pressure on the Northern Frontier Prince's residence and ask Lord Dragon King to revoke this decree, right? Hu Yan sneered and said coldly, then you have the wrong idea. To be honest, clearing out the land is only the first step of Li Zhong's plan. Next, he will ask the aristocratic families and farmers to pay the same taxes in the future, which is a 50% tax. Whoever has more land will pay more in the future, and whoever has less land will still have to suffer this cut. Boom! Hu Yan's words were like a heavy bomb, and the whole Hu residence was as noisy as a market. The aristocratic families that were doing the worst paid 50% tax to the government every year. The aristocratic families that were doing well in the northern frontier didn't pay much. Other than the Qiao clan, who only paid 10% tax, there were many aristocratic families that paid 20% or 30% tax. Moreover, they had the most land. Now that there were no farmers to cultivate the land, they had to pinch their noses and swallow bitter medicine to pay the tax. If the tax rate was raised again, how could they survive? More importantly, the Northern Frontier Prince's residence's arrangement for the farmers was simply forcing them into a dead end. As long as the farmers were willing to cultivate the land, they could go to the newly established settlement and obtain a much larger land than before based on their ability and population. In addition, the Northern Frontier Prince's residence had issued a decree that as long as the farmers cultivated the new land, they only needed to pay 20% tax for 10 years. Although after 10 years, they had to pay the same 50% tax to the aristocratic families as they did to the Northern Frontier Prince's residence. The land they obtained from the Northern Frontier Prince's residence was much larger than their original land. It was still a profitable business. In this era, the people at the lowest level didn't even have enough to eat. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent the land passed down from their ancestors to the aristocratic families for a little tax reduction. Although there was no contract, in name, they had turned from free farmers to serfs of the aristocratic families. Therefore, the problem that the people of the northern frontier thought of was very simple. They didn't care whether the land they cultivated belonged to them, the aristocratic families, or the northern frontier prince's residence. As long as the food that fell into their hands after the annual harvest was more than before, it was fine. Therefore, it was impossible for the aristocratic families to do better than the northern frontier prince's residence in terms of welfare. Even if they suppressed 10% or 20% of the tax, it would only be considered as a stopgap and definitely not a profit. Chapter 4:16. Moreover, the descendants of the northern frontier aristocratic families looked down on these farmers. Even if they didn't have a contract, these farmers were often taken advantage of by the aristocratic families for the sake of their reputation. Therefore, there was a lot of resentment between the two parties. However, these farmers didn't dare to say anything in the past, so there wasn't any conflict. Now that there was another way to feed their families, these farmers wouldn't be willing to mix with the aristocratic families, even if they didn't want the land that was passed down from their ancestors. Even if the aristocratic families were willing to give up their profits, it wasn't something that could be solved with just a 10% or 20% tax deduction. If they wanted to keep these farmers, they would have to offer a greater discount than the Northern Frontier Prince's residence. In other words, if the Northern Frontier Prince's residence only collected 20% tax for the first 10 years, they would be exempt from the tax. In the future, if the Northern Frontier Prince's residence raised the tax to 50%, they would only be able to collect 20% tax. However, if they turned around, they would have to give 50% of the income from the farmland to the Northern Frontier Prince's residence. If the income from the land wasn't enough, then they would have to fork out their own money and grain to make up for it. Although everyone present was the head of a large family, it would be fine if they had to live like this for a year or two, but who would be able to stand it after a long time? Even if they had a mountain of gold, they couldn't just sit around and eat until it ran out. Even if they could get a decent amount of income from the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce every year, their lifeline was in the hands of others. If they casually found a reason to stop them, such as not giving them goods or restricting their caravan from leaving the country, they would come looking for trouble if they couldn't settle the debt. According to the rules of the Shenwu dynasty, although the aristocratic families could annex land, they were not allowed to lose any of the land under their name unless it was handed over to the local government. Unless there was an unstoppable natural disaster, the crime of losing the land was the same as a general losing a battle and losing a city. The best result would be the execution of the family head, confiscation of the property, and exile of the entire family. Head of the Hu family. You are the king of the northern frontier. Are you going to just watch that brat Li Zhong do whatever he wants? A head of an aristocratic family who weighed close to 150 kilograms choked and said with a gloomy gaze, "Don't forget, although you are the king of the northern frontier, your Hu family is still an aristocratic family in the northern frontier. We don't have to say which side you should sit on, right?" Bang! Hu Yan slammed the teacup in his hand onto the table and looked coldly at the fatty. He growled, "Isn't it obvious who this Hu favors? If it weren't for this Hu's words today, you would still be foolishly guarding your own land. Only after the northern frontier prince's estate has squeezed all the profits dry will you realize that you've suffered a great loss." Logically speaking, although Hu Yan's performance was strong enough, these family heads were also shrewd people. They naturally knew that Hu Yan had gathered all of them here because he had a request. Therefore, each of them gave Hu Yan a cold shoulder, just so that their family could put in less effort. However, this fatty obviously did not know how to control his strength. He slapped his palm directly on Hu Yan's reverse scale. Everyone knew that Hu Yan, the king of the northern frontier, was just a figurehead who was not even as good as Lei Fan. In any case, Lei Fan still had the northern frontier guard army in his hands. Moreover, he was from the Lei family. All the forces in the northern frontier had to give Lei Fan some face. In the eyes of Lin Yuan, Lei Fan was like an ant. He could kill him as he wished. Now, in Hu Yan's hands, other than the Hu family, there were only 100,000 prince's guards. Moreover, no one knew how many of these 100,000 prince's guards were spies of the Demon Emperor Association. Figurehead was the synonym of Hu Yan. However, Hu Yan was from the Hu family and had inherited the title of Shunning City's city lord. His talent was not bad. Other than being suppressed by Lin Yuan and Lei Fan, he was also a proud and arrogant person. This fatty immediately criticized Hu Yan, but he had touched Hu Yan's bottom line. This was because his words were more or less criticizing Hu Yan for not putting in effort for the family, and had always stood on the side of the northern frontier prince's mansion. Even his tone was somewhat harsh. However, they all knew that Hu Yan was the one who had put in the most effort in this incident. At this point, to say that Hu Yan did not put in effort was equivalent to pointing at Hu Yan's nose and calling him a useless person. Hu Yan's sudden outburst immediately caused everyone to keep quiet out of fear. Each and every one of them looked at Hu Yan with their mouths agape. After a while, the patriarchs of the aristocratic families acted as if nothing had happened just now. They began to toast each other, and the atmosphere of joy and laughter was restored in a short time. They were all trying to suppress this fatty's mistake openly and covertly. "Humph!" Hu Yan snorted coldly and shifted his gaze away from the fatty. He said in a deep voice, "Everyone's mouth is unforgiving, but in your hearts, you all know that in order to stop this new set of policies, this Hu had to shed all pretense of cordiality with all the officials in the northern frontier prince's mansion. But there was no other choice. Li Zhong has the backing of Lord Dragon King. With just this Hu's strength, how can I be a match for that guy? I ask everyone to lend me a hand." Family head who must be joking. A young man dressed in a scholarly robe stood up and cupped his hands towards Hu Yan. He sneered and said, "My Wang family is in the northern frontier. Although we are not considered a big family, we are still very clear about the matter of being loyal to the emperor. It's just some land. If Lord Dragon King likes it, he can take it. My Wang family will never do anything to betray Lord Dragon King." Humph! What a nice way to put it. Isn't it because you are afraid? The plump family head from before snorted coldly and said sarcastically, "If your Wang family really doesn't care, why did you come all the way to Shunning City? Could it be that you are here to freeload off family head whose banquet today?" When the arrow was on the bow, some people flinched at the last moment, and some people were provoked. Naturally, there were differences in opinion. After all the people gathered here were the family heads of various aristocratic families. Naturally, there was no such thing as a spy of the Demon Emperor. Moreover, since Hu Yan had issued the invitation for this banquet, he would naturally make preparations in advance. Otherwise, wouldn't it be awkward if the infamous Dragon King suddenly appeared in the middle of the meeting? Anyway, Lord Dragon King couldn't hear it, so it didn't matter if his tone was a little harsh. Those who walk different paths cannot work together. The young man surnamed Wang's fair face turned pale. Obviously, he was angry and ashamed. However, at this moment, He also knew that this was not a place where he could act wantonly. He cupped his hands towards the plump family head and said in a deep voice, "Once again, this Wang wishes all the family heads to have their wishes come true. Forgive me for not keeping you company. Goodbye." Wait. The fat man opened his mouth again. That mouth of his seemed to only know how to offend people. He said coldly, "If you go out like this, who can guarantee that you won't report us to the Wang family in the northern frontier? Do you think that at this point, anyone who wants to quit can do so?" Chapter 4:17. What do you want to do? The young man surnamed Wang's expression became increasingly unsightly. Each aristocratic family was like a local tyrant in their own territory. Even if the scale was different, no aristocratic family would really be afraid of other aristocratic families, especially in their own territory. For these aristocratic families, besides Lin Yuan, only the 1,000-year-old Xiao family could truly make them feel reverence. Being able to appear in Shunning City as the representative of the Wang family, the young man surnamed Wang naturally had a lot of authority in the Wang family. Now that he was forced into a dead end by the other party, he naturally could not take the same attitude as before. There were so many people present. Of course the young man surnamed Wang was not the only one who wanted to retreat. It was just that before he spoke, these people were still hesitating in their hearts. Not many people were willing to fall out with Lin Yuan for the sake of their own land, but the fate of the sects and forces was obvious. They were more worried that once the aristocratic families fell apart, they would be completely wiped out by the northern frontier prince's mansion. Stirring up conflict at this time was the most foolish thing to do. Soon, a fair-skinned fat middle-aged man came out with a smile to smooth things over. He said, "Since Master who invited us here, he must have his own ideas. Otherwise, why would he come here to fan the flames? The northern frontier prince's mansion hasn't made a move yet. Do you think we can start fighting among ourselves first?" As his voice fell, even the hostile young man surnamed Wang and the plump master of the heavenly court paused. At this juncture, it would be the biggest joke if they started a fight with their own people. Although there were some differences in their attitudes towards the northern frontier prince's mansion, they were all members of aristocratic families and their interests were the same. "Is that right? Master Hu?" The fair-skinned fat master of the heavenly court saluted Hu Yen, thinking that Hu Yen was too blind. No matter what the northern frontier prince's mansion was planning, the aristocratic families of the northern frontier must now unite. Otherwise, with the strength of one family alone, there was absolutely no way to fight against the northern frontier prince's mansion. But if they united, although there was still a great disparity in strength, at least they could ensure that the land issue would not be solved by force, and they would have space to move. "My idea? My idea is very simple." Hu Yen narrowed his eyes slightly and said coldly, "Let's join forces and put pressure on the northern frontier prince's residence. Lord Dragon King is very busy during this period. The southern expedition is about to set out to sweep away the rebels nearby. The Fallen Star Army is also going to move into the southern expedition and start recruiting. Also, the Demon Emperor Association and the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce have many minor details that need to be changed. Lord Dragon King is not free. Our opponent from the very beginning is only Li Zhong." This? The family heads looked at each other in dismay. They did want to join forces to put pressure on the northern frontier prince's mansion, but they did not have any clue at the moment. After all, they did not intend to fall out with the northern frontier prince's mansion at all. Naturally, they could not use those insidious tricks in the past. Therefore it was quite difficult to control the scale. "Don't worry, everyone. Since I dared to invite you here, I have made full preparations. I have also prepared a plan for how to put pressure on the northern frontier prince. After today's banquet, you will go back to your own territories and think of ways to do something about the farmland and population. Then, write a letter of impeachment and send it to the northern frontier prince's mansion. For example, the secretaries of the Qingzhong land and the soldiers of the Fallen Star Army have been accumulating wealth and raping women in the northern region for their own personal gains. That is why the people in the northern region have no way of making a living, and there have even been cases of murder. You have already exhausted your brains just to maintain the stability of the northern region. You don't have the energy to do anything else. Remember, in the letter of complaint that you send to the northern frontier prince's mansion, you must write that these secretaries and soldiers will be severely punished. At the same time, You will find a way to detain them first and then pour the dirty water on them. At that time, I will send people to investigate. Then, both sides will work together and directly kill him. Even if we can't bring down Li Zhong, we can still cut off his henchmen. After this group of people is dealt with, he will definitely send his men out to clear the land. Therefore, if he wants to use people, he can only use my people. Hu Yan reached out and patted his chest. The smile on his face gradually became wilder and wilder. He said in a cold voice, "When my men go to clear the land, we will have the final say on how much fertile land and how much wasteland there is. When Li Zhong fails his task, the Dragon King will definitely be angry. Although he won't kill Li Zhong, he will definitely hand this matter over to other capable subordinates." Hu Yan's idea was very simple. Since they couldn't bring down Li Zhong directly, then they would just cut off Li Zhong's henchmen. When Li Zhong had no one to rely on, even if Lin Yuan still wanted to use Li Zhong to handle this matter, he wouldn't have the ability to do so. And for the heads of these aristocratic families, it was also a matter of ease for them to detain the officials of various government offices. They didn't even need to discuss the process carefully. This series of operations could be carried out perfectly. As long as the secret wasn't leaked in advance, Hu Yan couldn't think of any reason why this plan would fail. This method is not bad, but isn't the risk a little too high? This time, the one who spoke was still the head of the Heavenly Court. Obviously, on this issue, he wasn't on the same side as Hu Yan. He pondered for a moment and said with a cold gaze, "Although I believe that head Hu's side is very clean, at least for now, there aren't any spies of the Association of the Demon Emperor. But who can guarantee that when we go back, our side will be clean as well? Once the Association of the Demon Emperor reports what we have done to Lord Dragon King, I don't think we have any way to survive. The Association of the Demon Emperor is just a bunch of lackeys." The fatty who offended the others said again, "This isn't the first time this old man has dealt with the Association of the Demon Emperor. These guys aren't people who are loyal to Lord Dragon King. They care more about their own interests. If you are afraid that your actions will be leaked, you can send a large amount of money to the Association of the Demon Emperor's branch presidents. Not only can this guarantee that the plan will be foolproof, it's even possible for the Association of the Demon Emperor to assist you in this matter." As soon as the fatty finished speaking, the group of family heads started whispering again. Obviously, the Association of the Demon Emperor wasn't loyal to Lin Yuan. As long as there were enough benefits, they could be controlled. This was an open secret to the entire northern frontier. But at this moment, obviously no one thought that what they saw was what Lin Yuan wanted them to see. Even if the Demon Emperor was really as they imagined, the benefits they offered wouldn't be more than what the northern frontier Wang residents offered. Happy National Day to everyone. Chapter 4:18. That's true, but... The head of the Heavenly Court opened his mouth again and said in a deep voice, "Even if we topple Li Zhong, what's the use? The problem of the aristocratic families in the northern frontier is a problem that Lord Dragon King wants to solve. Even if we topple Li Zhong, there will still be Wang Zhong and Zhao Zhong to do it. We took such a big risk to do this. Is it just to delay our deaths?" Everyone fell silent again and looked at Hu Yan anxiously. Because what he said was indeed reasonable. Everyone took such a big risk to do this. Once it was found out, it would give the northern frontier prince's residents a legitimate reason to eradicate them. But in the end, the results still did not change. The biggest beneficiary might be Hu Yan, because Li Zhong was Hu Yan's #1 political enemy. After he was eradicated, Hu Yan would still be a puppet, but at least a puppet with more power. Those officials who came later would more or less be afraid of Hu Yan. "Brother Zhang, you're right. It's His Majesty the Dragon King's will to clear the land in the northern region. No matter who comes here, we have to follow his orders. But now, Li Zhong is sitting in this position, and it's obvious to all of you that he's not even willing to spare time to have a meal with us. This guy is bent on taking back the land in our hands. I don't mean to say this, but even if you're willing to give Li Zhong great wealth, he won't be willing to accept these benefits, right? But if someone else sits in Li Zhong's position, he knows that the first condition to do this well is that we aristocratic families cooperate with him. Otherwise, he will collapse in the same way that Li Zhong collapsed. Unless Lord Dragon King directly uses force to eradicate the aristocratic families in the northern frontier, the result will not change. So this new guy, no matter what he is thinking, has to give us face. When the time comes, everyone can show off their skills to please each other. At least on the land clearance issue, everyone will have room to maneuver. At least, you will not be killed directly and have no chance to make a comeback. Moreover, to put it bluntly, I, Hu Yan, am the king of the northern frontier in name, but in fact, I am just a puppet. So, whether Li Zhong falls or not, it has nothing to do with me. I do these things and say these things because I am also a member of the aristocratic families. Of course, I also have to figure out the intentions of my superiors. Otherwise, one day if I make an unintentional mistake, I will end up with my head separated from my body. So, according to my speculation, once Li Zhong falls, the new person who will take over is most likely me. Because my superiors can't bear to see me having influence in the northern frontier. Now, my biggest reliance is actually all of you, who are also aristocratic families. If I am in charge of this matter, no matter the result is good or bad, I will definitely be at odds with all of you. Looking at this matter from my superior's point of view, I am the most suitable person to take over Li Zhong. Similarly, if I am in charge of this matter, then there will be more room for you to maneuver. As long as we can make a good show, this set of government decrees can be postponed indefinitely. Hu Yan reached out and patted his chest, taking on the responsibility of everything, and said, even if it can't be postponed indefinitely, there will definitely be no problem for 30 to 50 years. At that time, with everyone's intelligence and wisdom, can't you find another way out? Hu Yan's words could be said to be quite reasonable and quite tempting. To put it bluntly, it was hard to say if the current northern frontier regime could still exist for 30 to 50 years. With Lei Qiuxing's tyrannical personality, if it wasn't for the fact that he was helpless, he definitely wouldn't allow someone else to sleep beside him. Once the Shunwu dynasty swept away the surrounding rebellions, the first thing they would do would be to make an example out of the northern frontier. He wouldn't allow the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce to continue controlling the price of the phase of the Shunwu dynasty. Even if the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce still existed, it should be surnamed Lei. Therefore, 30 to 50 years later, even if they couldn't find another way out, without Lin Yuan suppressing them, they could continue to maintain the current situation. They would still be the dominant aristocratic family in the northern frontier. Pfft. A sneer suddenly sounded at an inappropriate time. Everyone turned their heads with cold gazes, only to discover that the sneer came from Xiao Yilin. Xiao Yilin put down the chopsticks in his hand and elegantly wiped the grease at the corner of his mouth. He cupped his hands and said, "My apologies. Because this is a banquet hosted by the northern frontier, this one was still fantasizing about some exotic delicacies, so I came on an empty stomach. Previously, when everyone was talking loudly, this one was still busy filling my stomach and really didn't hear what everyone was saying." At this point, Xiao Yilin stood up and looked coldly at all the family heads present. He said in a cold voice, "I'll have to trouble everyone to repeat what you said earlier about not having a ruler and not having a father." As Xiao Yilin stood up, the heads of the 10 or so families affiliated with the Qiao family at the same table also stood up, including Shui Yan, who had a good personal relationship with Lin Yuan after the trip to the secret territory. A mere 10 or so people looked at the hundreds of people in the courtyard, revealing an aura of disdain for the world, as if the family heads in this courtyard were all clay chickens and pottery dogs. Thump. Seeing Xiao Yilin and Shui Yan take the lead in opposing, everyone's hearts suddenly sank. The Qiao family and Shui family were on good terms with Lin Yuan. Previously, Xiao Yilin didn't say anything, so everyone instinctively thought that Hu Yan didn't invite this leading figure of the northern frontier family. It wasn't until now that Xiao Yilin suddenly spoke that everyone realized that the Qiao family and Shui family were on the side of the northern frontier prince's residence from the beginning. "Xiao Yilin, others may be afraid of you, but I'm not." Hu Yan swallowed a mouthful of saliva and forced himself to calm down as he spoke. "Of course you're not afraid of me. You're the prince of the northern frontier. Even if I had the guts as big as the sky, I wouldn't dare to kill you." Xiao Yilin crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked mockingly at Hu Yan. He said in a low voice, "However, the prince's residence guards are really strong. To be able to hold on until now without having their gates breached." "What breaching the gates? What are you talking about?" Hu Yan's eyes widened as he growled, "Xiao Yilin, I know that you're on good terms with His Excellency the Dragon King, but as the leader of the Northern Frontier family, you should know that once the series of land clearing decrees are completed, everyone will suffer a huge loss. And your Qiao family, as the #1 family on the northern frontier, will bear the brunt of this. I advise you to think carefully about which side you should stand on. Everyone's hearts finally relaxed a little. No matter how good the Qiao family and Shui family's relationship with Lin Yuan, they were still members of the northern frontier family. Just like Hu Yan, the prince of the northern frontier, when Lin Yuan wanted to implement the land-clearing decrees on the northern frontier, he also resolutely chose to stand on the side of the family. Chapter 419. While the undercurrent was surging in the Hu clan's courtyard, Lin Yuan, who was observing the progress of Li Zhong's work in the prince's residence at the northern frontier, suddenly raised his head. His gaze paused on Li Zhong for a moment, before Li Zhong understood and led his subordinates out of the courtyard where he worked. After everyone had left, a figure wearing a moon-white brocade robe and a black fox fur cloak slowly appeared. That jade-like face looked even whiter under the moonlight. There wasn't even the slightest trace of blood in it, making it look a little demonic. Even though it was the first time they had met, Lin Yuan quickly realized that this somewhat demonic-looking man was Zhang Xiao, the head of the embroidered uniform guard, the head of the Shenwu dynasty's secret service, who made countless people tremble in fear upon hearing his name. Lord Dragon King, this is the first time we've met. Please accept this humble gift as a token of my respect. Zhang Xiao bowed slightly and casually tossed out a brocade box. It accurately landed on the ground 3 feet in front of Lin Yuan. Due to the collision, the contents of the brocade box clearly shook a few times. Very quickly, blood seeped out from the bottom of the brocade box. Lin Yuan's multicolored eyes focused slightly. A wave of demonic power flashed past, and the brocade box shattered into pieces, revealing a head that had died with remaining grievances. It was the young lieutenant of the Ether Association. That hideous face that had died with remaining grievances was filled with resentment and unwillingness. However, other than a neat cut on his neck, there were no other injuries. It was obvious that this fellow had died at the hands of an expert in the art of the blade. Moreover, the other party had revealed his identity and purpose for coming. Furthermore, the moment the young lieutenant's expression had changed, he had drawn his blade and killed him. Then he had placed the head in a brocade box and presented it to Lin Yuan. Lord Zhang, are you demonstrating your power to this king? Lin Yuan's multicolored eyes remained slightly narrowed, but the killing intent on his body surged out like a river. I wouldn't dare. I'm just cleaning up the ranks. My embroidered uniform guard has never needed incompetent subordinates, much less useless trash. Zhang Xiao smiled faintly and received all of Lin Yuan's killing intent. However, he did not reveal any strange expression. Without waiting for Lin Yuan to speak again, Zhang Xiao straightened his clothes and said indifferently, I came to the northern frontier on His Majesty's orders. After all, you went overboard in the northern frontier. First, you used the opportunity of attacking the sects to humiliate the king of the northern frontier. Now, you want to humiliate the king of the northern frontier by attacking the aristocratic families. We can't figure it out. If the king of the northern frontier collapses, it doesn't seem to be beneficial to Lord Dragon King, right? Zhang Xiao repeatedly pondered over Lin Yuan's actions and results. The king of the northern frontier was a fig leaf for the Shenwu dynasty, but wasn't it also a fig leaf for Lin Yuan? If it weren't for the existence of the king of the northern frontier in name, the 7 dynasties would not have allowed the monster forces to step out of the Hengduan Mountains, let alone control the lives and deaths of tens of thousands of people in a region. Therefore, the existence of the king of the northern frontier was not only a foreshadowing left behind by the Shenwu dynasty to invade the northern frontier in the future, it was also a banner that Lin Yuan had to raise. What's more, even if the 7 dynasties did not care about Lin Yuan, without the principle of the supremacy of the royal authority, there were still not many benefits for Lin Yuan to govern the northern frontier. After all, when the hearts of the people lost their fear of the royal authority, even if the king of the northern frontier was completely turned into a puppet, how could Lin Yuan, the dragon king of the Black Water, not be affected by it? The northern frontier does not need a king. What the northern frontier needs is a book of laws and a leader. To the northern frontier, the identity of the leader is not important. As long as the direction he chooses is right, he will naturally be supported. As for the impact on the royal authority, Lin Yuan smiled. His voice paused for a moment, and then he revealed his sharpness and coldly said, What does it have to do with this king? This king is not the ruler of the northern frontier. In name, this king is the righteous God in charge of the northern frontier. Without the king of the northern frontier is still the northern frontier. But without this king, this righteous God, is the northern frontier still the northern frontier? Zhang Xiu thought silently for a moment. Suddenly, he grinned and cupped his hands, saying, I see. I have learned something. However, Zhang Xiu had clearly not come all this way to clean up the pawns of the Ether Association, nor was it to stand up for Hu Yan, who was doomed to die. As a result, Zhang Xiu quickly adjusted his state of mind and said, Sir Dragon King, you should know that although the current Shenwu Empire is still in a precarious state, it's still far from before, when the empire could have been destroyed with the slightest carelessness. We only need a bit of time to return to our golden age. Yes. Lin Yuan nodded slightly and did not deny Zhang Xiu's words. Then, Lord Dragon King, you should know that you and the King of Qingpeng are our biggest opponents in wiping out the Pebblestones. However, compared to the King of Qingpeng who directly rebelled, the northern frontier has accepted the imperial edict in name and is under the jurisdiction of the Shenwu dynasty. It is up to you whether you accept it or not. It all depends on His Majesty's intentions and whether you are willing to submit to him. Zhang Xiu tilted his head and smiled evilly. He continued, His Majesty's decree is that as long as the northern frontier is willing to send troops to suppress the rebels and is willing to solve some problems for His Majesty, then the northern frontier can still maintain the current situation and can even receive our help. Please speak. Lin Yuan also tilted his head and replied indifferently. Lin Yuan did not expect the Shenwu dynasty to come and make requests at this time. However, Lin Yuan quickly figured out the crux of the matter. Although the Shenwu dynasty was unstoppable now, after careful study, one would realize that all the triumphs during this period were because of Shen Lin Jun's invincibility. However, even if Shen Lin Jun was really invincible, there was a limit to his scale. It was impossible for him to really plow through the entire Shenwu dynasty's territory. Otherwise, even an elite like Shen Lin Jun would suffer heavy losses. Therefore, if the Shenwu dynasty wanted to quell the internal strife as soon as possible, they needed the cooperation of Lin Yuan and Lei Qiuming. Therefore, Lin Yuan could be sure that when Zhang Xiu appeared at the northern frontier, the other person, who was no less important than Zhang Xiu, should have also rushed to Lei Qiuming's side. Lei Qiuming's move was to make use of his two biggest rivals. After swallowing up the small rebels nearby, Lei Qiuming's next step was to deal with the two of them wholeheartedly. First, since the northern frontier is the royal territory of the Shenwu dynasty, we cannot interfere with the internal legal reform of the royal territory. We can even pretend that the Dragon King did not overstep his authority and built a city without the permission of the dynasty. However, even if it is an autonomous royal territory, the taxes that should be paid should not be less, right? Zhang Xiu's eyes were smiling. Although his voice was soft, it suppressed Lin Yuan's aura. Chapter 420. Reasonable. Lin Yuan nodded and didn't raise any objections. As a subject, it was reasonable for him to pay taxes to the lords. If Lin Yuan couldn't do this, how could he ask those aristocratic families and city lords to pay taxes to him? After all, the Shenwu dynasty wasn't an existence that the northern frontier could casually abandon. Otherwise, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce under his command would instantly become a joke, and the 7 dynasties would join forces to suppress him. Although the Shenwu dynasty's rule was 70% tax, the northern frontier was an autonomous territory and also had the privilege of reducing taxes. 70% tax was considered a token and wouldn't affect the northern frontier's development. It was within Lin Yuan's acceptable range. Second, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce is using the Shenwu dynasty's name to do business with the 6 dynasties. But the benefits will all fall into Lord Dragon King's pocket. Don't you think this is inappropriate? Zhang Xiu's smile didn't fade. It was obvious that Lin Yuan's action of agreeing to pay taxes had given him confidence, so he struck while the iron was hot and raised the second condition. It's appropriate. The one who replied to Zhang Xiu this time was Lin Yuan's confident reply. Then, without waiting for Zhang Xiu to come up with words to persuade Lin Yuan said, "The Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce is now able to pass through the Hengduan mountain range and do business with the other 6 dynasties because it is 100% under my control. Therefore, I don't care if this is your idea, Lei Qiuming's idea, or that influential person's idea. I won't make any concessions. At this point, Lin Yuan even yawned and said lazily, "Of course, you might have a way to seize the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce's ownership by force or even make me suffer in silence. In that case, I can guarantee that no caravan will be able to pass through the Hengduan mountain range. Even the Shenwu dynasty's various prices, especially the prices of feis, will rapidly increase to a price that you won't be able to accept." "You?" Zhang Xiu's smile dimmed, and he almost couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. Lin Yuan's words were too arrogant. The moment he spoke, he directly called out Zhang Xiu, Lei Qiuxing, and some influential people. It was obvious that he didn't intend to give anyone face. He even threatened Zhang Xiu that if they dared to make a move on the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, the situation of him raising the prices of feis would happen again. Although the embroidered guard spies in the northern frontier had almost been completely uprooted, everyone knew that the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce's control absolutely belonged to Lin Yuan. Even if one had climbed to the position of vice president in the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, if Lin Yuan didn't say anything, they wouldn't be able to take out any feis from the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce's storehouse. This was because the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce's storehouse was in the Stoneclaw Forest, which belonged to the Fey Beast's territory. Without Lin Yuan's order, any human who stepped into the Stoneclaw Forest would definitely not have a good ending. As for Zhang Xiu's previous idea, he had wanted the Ether Association to cooperate with another Fey faction and replace Lin Yuan's exclusive control of feis. However, it seemed like this plan had come to an end. Why would a caravan under the banner of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce be able to cross the Hengduan mountain range? Because of benefits? Of course not. That was because Lin Yuan had the final say in the northern frontier. He also had the support of the three Beast Kings and Beast Lord Kirin. Lin Yuan, who had contributed greatly to the Fey Beast race's expansion, naturally had the face to do this. Even if the other Beast Kings didn't like humans, they had to suppress their temper and watch the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce's caravan pass through their territory on account of Lin Yuan's expansion. However, if it were another Fey Beast clan, they obviously wouldn't give Lin Yuan face, not to mention that Lin Yuan was very likely to be the next Beast Lord. This was especially so for the Green Swamp clan, which was the worst choice. The Green Swamp clan was indeed one of the stronger clans in the Hengduan mountain range. Even the great Beast Kings had suffered losses before. However, there were many other powerful clans, and not all of them were as good as the Nine-Colored Deer clan. An existence like the Green Swamp clan was no different from a rat crossing the street. If they were allowed to do this, no matter how many goods were transported, they would never be able to return. It was precisely because of these factors that those Beast Kings had opened the door to Lin Yuan for the sake of benefits. However, I am not an inflexible person. The Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce can bring in huge profits, and it's naturally impossible for no one to be jealous of this profit. Therefore, if a powerful ally is willing to join us, I naturally can't ask for anything more. I can make the decision to give you 30% of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce's annual income. As for whether this profit will be given to you, or if you will give it to Lei Qiuxing, or if it will be evenly distributed, that is your own business. I only need you to help me withstand the internal pressure of the Shenwu dynasty after receiving the benefits. Don't let anyone casually reach out to the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. As a compromise, I can agree to let the embroidered guard spies re-enter the northern frontier. However, I must have a list of these spies, and they must unconditionally accept the Council of the Fey Emperor's surveillance. If they do anything that crosses the line, or if there are spies not on the list, I will immediately eliminate them. Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes flashed with a dangerous cold light. He sneered and said, "If you don't agree, then you will have nothing. When the world falls into chaos again, I won't be as easy to talk to as I am now." Zhang Xiu thought for a moment before nodding heavily. Not to mention the Shenwu dynasty, even in the 7 grand dynasties, the status of merchants was actually not high. There was no such thing as business tax. Lin Yuan was willing to give them 30% of the profits, which was equivalent to giving the Shenwu dynasty a tax that was even higher than the annual income of the northern frontier. Moreover, it was the kind that would be directly sent to the private treasury. After receiving such great benefits, it was reasonable for them to help Lin Yuan resist the pressure from the nobles. That's all for this. There is one last thing. Zhang Xiu sighed helplessly and said in a deep voice, "His Majesty often says that if you are a Fey Emperor, You will definitely be a good minister who can rule the world for him. Right now, His Majesty is very interested in your reforms and is willing to use the northern frontier as a test area. At the same time, he will also open up some new test areas within the Shenwu dynasty. However, your attitude towards the sects and aristocratic families is already very clear. However, for His Majesty, there is still a huge problem that has not been resolved. The various vassals? Lin Yuan smiled and took the initiative to ask. That's right. Zhang Xiu nodded and said coldly, there cannot be a second example like Lei Qiuming. Actually, learning from Lin Yuan to deal with the northern frontier king was also a method. However, Lei Qiusheng would definitely not be willing to do something that would shake the royal authority and the foundation of the Grand Dynasty. Chapter 421. Your Highness, it's not good. Outside. There are a lot of rioters outside, and they are attacking the main gate of the Hu estate. A guard of the prince's mansion, whose armor was stained with blood, rotten vegetables, and eggs, quickly walked over and reported to Hu Yan, who was standing on the main seat. You! Hu Yan, who was confronting Xiao Yilin, was slightly startled, and the anger in his eyes almost solidified. The northern frontier was now peaceful and prosperous. Those refugees who didn't know the top of the food chain in the northern frontier even praised him, the king of the northern frontier, as an extraordinary prince, a hero who could open up a paradise in troubled times. Therefore, these people definitely wouldn't attack his private residence for no reason. Moreover, for such a big matter, even if his subordinates wanted to report, they wouldn't say it out loud in front of so many outsiders. In order to avoid unnecessary panic, they would at most come over and whisper a few words to give him enough time to react, and arrange for these family heads to leave the Hu estate's main courtyard first. Therefore, at this point it was already very obvious. Xiao Yilin's sudden attack, the rioters attacking the main gate of the Hu estate, and the guards reporting it out loud regardless of the consequences. All of these, from the beginning to the end, were conspiracies planned by the Association of the Demon Emperor. The guard in front of him, whom he trusted the most, was also a member of the Association of the Demon Emperor. Tonight was Hu Yan's private banquet. In order to prevent the Association of the Demon Emperor's spies from sneaking in, he even cleared out the Hu estate servants and branch family members in advance, including the servants, the cooks, and the guards. They were all his trusted aides, and anyone who he suspected was not qualified to enter the Hu estate's main courtyard tonight. But even so, who knew how many of the Association of the Demon Emperor's spies were in this group of people? Sure enough, almost as soon as the messenger's voice fell, all the patriarchs in the Hu clan's courtyard shot up from their seats as if there were steel needles in their chairs. Pairs of ice-cold gazes fell on Hu Yan's face, as if they wanted nothing more than to swallow Hu Yan alive. To these family heads, they were all in the same boat. Apart from being the family head of the Hu estate, Hu Yan also had the identity of the king of the northern frontier. At such a crucial moment, Hu Yan gathered them here to put on a show and give Lin Yuan an excuse to wipe them out in one fell swoop. Feeling the cold eyes on him, Hu Yan opened his mouth several times, but couldn't say a word. He couldn't explain anything now. Even if Lin Yuan didn't take this opportunity to wipe out the northern frontier families, he would still skin them ruthlessly. As the person who set up this trap, Hu Yan was very clear that even if Lin Yuan didn't take care of him, these family heads who suffered losses wouldn't let him have an easy time, and the entire Hu estates would have no place in the northern frontier's northern frontier. Everyone's performance today has been broadcasted by the Association of the Demon Emperor through the projection stone in every city in the northern frontier. Family head Hu. Now do you know why the people of Shunning City attacked your Hu estate? Xiao Yilin patted the non-existent dust on his gown, looked around at everyone with a cold face, and said in a cold voice, ever since Lord Dragon King took over the northern frontier, he pushed for new policies, established new laws, and built new cities. Every move he made was for the betterment of the northern frontier. You are all northern frontier families, and you are all existences who share the same fate with this land. I originally thought that you would help Lord Dragon King, but I didn't expect that all of you would only be eyeing the small profits on your plate. Everything was as Li Zhong had predicted. Ever since Lin Yuan took over the northern frontier and established the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, all the sects and families made a lot of money in the beginning. Even the commoners who worked in related industries made a lot of money. After Lin Yuan defeated the sects, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce's profits were split between Lin Yuan and the aristocratic families. In the process of suppressing the sects in the northern frontier, the aristocratic families didn't do anything at all. Only the Qiao family showed their faces, but the aristocratic families didn't let go of any of the profits that the sects gave up after they withdrew. They thought that the aristocratic families were already satisfied. At least with the example of the sects, even if they were dissatisfied with the land clearance, they would only complain in private, but on the surface, they would definitely cooperate. But no one expected that the aristocratic families would resist so strongly when Lin Yuan wanted to take away the land that they didn't value very much. It was obvious that they only wanted to take in and not take out. They only wanted to reap benefits from Lin Yuan, and completely didn't think that they would have to contribute something to the reform of the northern frontier. Li Zhong had only thought of this after being obstructed again and again. Previously, the benefits of the northern frontier basically fell into the pockets of the aristocratic families. This time, although the land would eventually belong to the northern frontier prince's mansion, the commoners would actually benefit from it. Now that the aristocratic families didn't want to give up their land, Li Zhong simply used Hu Yan's last stand to let the commoners know who was obstructing the implementation of the new policy, and who didn't want them to get the benefits that they deserved. At this point, the public was completely infuriated. When the commoners of Shunning City attacked the Hu Mansion, Li Zhong knew that the Hu Mansion was just a small microcosm. Soon, all the aristocratic families in the northern frontier would face the same scene. Their greed would bring them the cruelest consequences. At the same time, the entire northern battlefront army cancelled their vacation. They were transferred to the northern frontier from all the posts, strongholds, and outskirts barracks. A large number of demi-human warriors from the monster forest were also transferred to the northern frontier. Under Li Zhong's operation, the aristocratic families in the northern frontier would be destroyed. At the same time, the northern frontier would also become chaotic. The arrival of the army could maximize the control of the situation. First, neither Lin Yuan nor Li Zhong wanted to take advantage of the situation to wipe out the aristocratic families in the northern frontier. Second, once the northern frontier became chaotic, people with ulterior motives or those lazy thugs would follow the trend to rob, fight, and smash things, which would make the northern frontier even more chaotic. Therefore, Li Zhong was very clear that the situation couldn't be out of control. Even if he had to use force, he had to repair the cracks in the chaos as soon as possible, so that everything would be under his control. The young man surnamed Wang's face obviously looked better. Although the commoners in the northern frontier might not let the Wang family go, he dared to go against Hu Yan and express that he didn't want to be Lin Yuan's enemy, so it wasn't completely useless. Even if it was just a show, Lin Yuan would protect him, the sensible head of the family, and the family. Chapter 422. When Zhang Xiu returned to the imperial capital, it was already 5 days later. It wasn't that Zhang Xiu was slow, but that he had stayed in the northern frontier for the past few days and had been discussing some details with Lin Yuan. Zhang Xiu had only left when he had more or less understood Lin Yuan's plan and the future reform of the northern frontier. On the way, he had already begun to record what he had seen and heard in the northern frontier. He then organized it into written documents and prepared to submit it to the Emperor Shenwu when he met him. After greeting the two guards, Xin Lin Jun, Zhang Xiu tidied his robe and walked into the imperial study. He raised his eyes slightly and saw Lei Qiuxing sitting on a large chair with a worried face. His right hand was holding the back of the chair and lightly tapping it. He was frowning and thinking about something. Zhang Xiu cleared his throat and bowed to Lei Qiuxing. He said in a clear voice, "Hi Zhang Xiu, greet the divine martial emperor. Thanks to your majesty's blessing, I was able to successfully establish contact with the Black Jiao. These are the details. Your majesty, please take a look." After he finished speaking, Lei Qiuxing seemed to have realized that Zhang Xiu had walked into the imperial study. He cleared his throat and the worry on his face instantly disappeared. Immediately, one of the eunuchs serving Lei Qiuxing bowed and trotted to Zhang Xiu's side. He held the documents that Zhang Xiu had written with both hands and trotted back to Lei Qiuxing's side. "My dear minister, you may rise." Lei Qiuxing took the documents from the eunuchs and lowered his head to read them. He didn't even raise his head as he spoke. Only then did Zhang Xiu stop kneeling. However, he still maintained a proper posture and stood there, carefully observing Lei Qiuxing's expression. After about 4 or 5 breaths, a smile appeared on Lei Qiuxing's originally serious face. he said in a low voice, using the greed of the aristocratic families to incite public anger, deliberately allowing the people under his rule to suppress the aristocratic families, and also increasing the strength of the troops stationed in various places. This Black Jiao is very powerful. He has the entire northern frontier aristocratic families in a tight grip. Even if they can survive the anger of the people, if they want to earn a living in the northern frontier in the future, they will have to rely on the Black Jiao. Ever since Lin Yuan had taken control of the northern frontier, Lei Qiuxing had been observing Lin Yuan's actions. On this matter, Lei Qiuxing didn't blindly trust Zhang Xiu and the embroidered uniform guard like before. Instead, he sent out imperial spies who had been heavily nurtured but might not be used in their entire lives to gather information about the northern frontier. Ever since Lin Yuan had chased away the Green Marsh clan and completely confirmed his position as the overlord of the Stoneclaw Forest and the surrounding areas, Lei Qiuxing had sighed from time to time. He expressed that if this Black Jiao, who had broken the norm, was a human, he would be the best candidate for the position of Grand Secretary of the Shenwu dynasty. Your Majesty, the information about the northern frontier is just a matter of convenience. You asked me to ask about the Black Jiao, and he also answered. Zhang Xiu stood with his head held high and chest out. However, a hint of seriousness flashed across his eyes. He said in a deep voice, "In my humble opinion, although this Black Jiao has given a solution, it is a strong medicine. Your Majesty needs to plan slowly. At the very least, you have to wait until the rebels under the Qingpang King's command have been dealt with before you can implement it." Order of gratitude? Before Zhang Xiu could finish speaking, Lei Qiuxing interrupted him. Zhang Xiu knew that Lei Qiuxing was expressing his dissatisfaction with him for interrupting him. He simply shut his mouth obediently and waited for the result. He had inquired about every detail of Lin Yuan's order of gratitude. On the way back, he had thought about it repeatedly. He was certain that although this move was beneficial for the Shenwu dynasty to weaken the vassal kings, once this decree was issued, the vassal kings of the Shenwu dynasty would be in uproar. Even the imperial clan court would express that this move was against the ancestral system. Although Lei Qiuxing was the founding emperor of the Shenwu dynasty, the monarchs of the 7 dynasties could not avoid the harem. Firstly, they needed a large number of heirs to choose the most suitable candidate to inherit the throne. Secondly, in such a large dynasty, aristocratic families, sects, and even nobles were forces that could not be ignored. As an emperor, he had to establish marriage relationships with various forces. Otherwise, if the people's hearts were not stable, the emperor's rule would not be stable. Therefore, whether it was Lei Qiuxing who sat in the Shenwu dynasty or the vassal kings who were in theft, they all had many concubines. These women did not have any other abilities, but they were definitely not that great. Otherwise, they would not have been sent to the harem by their families to fight for favor. However, they were indeed good at seducing men. Even a diligent monarch like Lei Qiuxing had 17 princes and 8 princesses. Even if Lei Qiuxing did not have any more heirs, after these princes came of age and selected suitable heirs, the remaining sons would also be sent to various places to be vassal kings. Once these vassal kings operated in their own territories for too long, it was easy for them to become recognized as kings by the commoners. Not to mention the fact that there was an emperor above them. Just like Lei Qiuming's rebellion this time, there was not a single person in the entire Qingpeng who said no. Although Lei Qiuxing's rebellion was successful and the royal family of the Wanjian dynasty was swept clean, those old bastards who had followed him to conquer the world were still in theft as vassal kings in various places. Even if their contributions were not enough to be conferred as kings, they were now high-ranking officials. After a few decades of effort, as long as they were not exiled like Yan Xingqi, even if they were a pig, they would be able to operate a considerable force in their own territory. Lei Qiuming's order to gather hundreds of thousands of rebels was indeed shocking. However, which of the military officers and nobles who had followed him to occupy the Magpie's Nest had less prestige than Lei Qiuming? They just did not take advantage of this opportunity to rebel. If they had any ideas, their influence might not be any less than Lei Qiuming's. Lei Qiuxing wanted to prevent Lei Qiuming's rebellion from happening again. Removing the vassal kings was the most important thing at the moment. However, whether it was now or in the future, there was no difference. If he wanted to remove the vassal kings, it would definitely cause the vassal kings to retaliate fiercely. Perhaps the situation that had been stabilized with great difficulty would once again fall short of success. However, Using the Edict of Pushing Grace to remove the vassal kings was the safest method. The vassal kings in that place did not have 7 or 8 children. When the old vassal king passed away, according to the tacit rule of the 7 great empires, the eldest son would inherit the old vassal king's title and territory and become the new vassal king. Day after day, he would continue to operate in his fief. As for the territories that belonged to the emperor, they would be in fief to the new vassal king when the new emperor succeeded the throne. After all, they were all the emperor's sons. However, in this way the imperial power would be lower and lower. Even when there were many vassal kings in the country, the emperor in name would only be considered a slightly stronger vassal king. Chapter 423. Not to mention a tyrannical emperor like Lei Qiusheng. Even if he was the lord of the earth, he would not want his territory to become weaker and his faction to become stronger and stronger. Therefore, the imperial power would constantly collide with each other. If those vassals were as troublesome as hedgehogs, then the change of imperial power would evolve into a struggle for the throne. The emperor's sons would frequently scheme in the imperial capital, and for the sake of the throne, they would not hesitate to kill each other until the strongest prince was chosen. Lin Yuan's command of Pushing Grace was different. This was a strong medicine, but it forced the vassals to be like the emperor. After their death, they would equally distribute their territory to each of their children. Although the title did not change, the actual power gap was too big. A prince would become a duke, and a duke would become a marquis. After 2 or 3 generations, most of the descendants of these vassals would also be guarding a city. It would be a fool's dream if they wanted to challenge the imperial power. At that time, the emperor would find a reason to take back the territory. The command of Pushing Grace was also a poisonous scheme. Just like how the ministers in the imperial court favored different princes according to their relationship and faction, the subordinates of the vassals naturally favored different princes. Once the command of Pushing Grace was taken out, whether the vassals were willing or not was another matter. However, except for the eldest son, each of the princes would spend a lot of effort to ensure the implementation of the command of Pushing Grace. After all, to be able to get a part of their father's territory was better than having nothing. It was better to be a rich man in the royal territory, afraid that his brother would find an excuse to kill him. By the time they regretted, it would already be time for them to split the vassal territory and pass it down to the next generation. What was the use of regretting at that time? Oh! After reading Lin Yuan's command of Pushing Grace, Lei Qiusheng let out a long breath and sneered. Amazing, amazing. If these sons of mine had half the ability of this Black Jiao, I would not need to continue to be in charge of the imperial court in the name of Heaven Dipper Realm. I would have already found a place with rich spiritual energy to cultivate. Zhang Xiu bowed slightly but did not speak. As the newly appointed head of Lei Qiusheng's secret service, Zhang Xiu could do many things without any taboos. If an official below rank 3 offended Zhang Xiu in any way, Zhang Xiu would not even need to find an excuse to kill them. However, when it came to matters related to the succession of the throne, Zhang Xiu could not be involved at all. Your Majesty, although the writ of gratitude is feasible, now is not the time for us to imitate the Black Jiao's new policies. Zhang Xiu lowered his voice and said with a serious expression, although Shen Linjun is strong, it is impossible for him to sweep through the entire territory with the strength of an army. When the rebels react, the situation that was stabilized with great difficulty will change again. Now that the Black Jiao is willing to cooperate with us, if we can persuade the king of Qingpeng to send out the 3 armies together, we will be able to pacify the world. At that time, it will be time for us to use the token of Pushing Grace. Lei Qiusheng closed his eyes slightly and leaned on the big chair. The great divine martial emperor was actually forced to worry about personal gains and losses by a group of rebels that could be easily annihilated. Even the imperial guards that guarded the imperial capital were not able to make all the rebels disappear in one battle. However, the Qingjiang and Shuangjin empires were still biting like vicious dogs. Almost all of the imperial forces were gathered at the border battlefield and there were not many troops to pacify the rebellion. It was already the limit of the imperial forces to maintain the current situation. Now, the only thing that Lei Qiusheng could hope for was that the 2 largest groups of rebels would accept the amnesty. Only when the king of Qingpeng and the northern frontier sent out troops to suppress the rebels could the Shenwu dynasty be truly stabilized. Let them go. Lei Qiusheng slowly opened his eyes and a sharp light flashed through his pupils. He said in a deep voice, "Don't worry about the northern frontier. The generals Li Zhongxing and Zhang Qilin were both from Shenlin Jun. Even if these people die, they will not turn against me. As long as the Black Jiao does not change its generals, it means that it has no intention of rebelling for the time being. Instead, we need to pay more attention to the king of Qingpeng. I understand. Zhang Xiu bowed slightly and replied in a deep voice. On the other side, in the northern frontier, Li Zhongxing was wearing a black armor. Looking at the red flag in front of him with the word, Li, printed in black characters, his eyes revealed a look of contemplation. 1,300,000 soldiers of the southern expedition gathered behind Li Zhongxing. Under the leadership of the various generals, they formed a square formation. They did not look like ruffians at all. Instead, they revealed the aura of a mighty army. An hour later, the southern expedition would officially step out of the northern frontier. They would sweep away the rebels nearby and expand the battle line until it covered the entire north. They would be separated from the imperial capital of the Shenwu dynasty by the Wei River. Commander, what are you thinking about? A guard went up and covered Li Zhongxing with a cloak and asked in a low voice. Li Zhongxing's right hand pressed on the hilt of the sword at his waist. He said bitterly, Emperor's Grace people, the Dragon King has given me a difficult problem. From the education that Li Zhongxing had received since he was young, the actions of the aristocratic families were not wrong. After all, Shenlin Jun either chose soldiers from the orphans of the soldiers who died in battle, or chose young people with good family backgrounds near the imperial capital. These people had received education since they were young that the imperial capital was supreme. Apart from that, the aristocratic families were respected. However, during this period of time in the northern frontier, Li Zhongxing had already seen the power of the people under the guidance of Lin Yuan. Li Zhongxing originally wanted to protect the rule of the Shenwu dynasty, reduce the welfare of the people, and enslave the people was a natural idea. He had been attacked more than once in the northern frontier. Even now, Li Zhongxing did not know whether his original insistence was right or wrong. Otherwise, when he received Lin Yuan's transfer order, Li Zhongxing would have gone back to the northern frontier prince's mansion and told Li Zhong everything. That way, even Li Zhong would not have provoked the anger of the people on the northern frontier to target the aristocratic families. However, in the end, Li Zhongxing did not go. He more or less wanted to escape. The guard pondered for a moment and said in a low voice, General, things have come to this point. It's meaningless to say these things. This time, we are sending troops to suppress the rebels in the north under the orders of the Shenwu dynasty and the Dragon King. I don't understand the worries in your heart, but you can think about it later. For now, it's more important to complete the task at hand. Li Zhong turned his head and glanced at his personal guard. He smiled bitterly again and shook his head. The purpose of the Southern Expedition Army was indeed to clean up the rebellious officials, but doing it according to Lin Yuan's idea and doing it according to the Shenwu dynasty's idea belonged to two completely different paths. And now he was confused because he didn't know which path he was going to take. Let's go! Li Zhongxing shook the cloak on his body and turned around to roar. The 1.3 million soldiers of the Southern Expedition immediately roared in agreement. Chapter 424. The resistance of the northern frontier aristocratic families vanished in the face of the anger of the northern frontier citizens. The reason why these aristocratic families could still exist in the northern frontier was because of the protection of the northern frontier prince's residence. How could they still have the guts to challenge the northern frontier? Li Zhong, who had eliminated his biggest political enemy, obtained the highest command authority in the northern frontier prince's residence while the northern frontier prince's residence Hu Yan was imprisoned. At the same time, with the cooperation of the various departments, he began to show his prowess. The first thing was to calculate all the cultivated land in each gathering place. Of course, it wasn't just about how much cultivated land there was. It also included the size of the cultivated land, the division of the cultivated land, and the output. It was also divided into 3 categories according to the fertility of the land. In this first document, the location of the cultivated land, whether it was planted with food or phase, and the estimated output was recorded in great detail. The second thing was to establish the position of grain chief according to the distribution of cultivated land in each settlement. The position would be held by the farmer who rented the most cultivated land and had a good moral character. Although the position of grain chief was just an empty title without any real power or rank, He would be responsible for calculating the total harvest in his own area during the harvest. He would also be responsible for collecting the taxes that should be paid every year. After all this was done, he would also have to prepare a written document and submit it to the local government. Unless the tax was collected, the local government was not allowed to participate in the collection of taxes. Of course, it wasn't just that the local government was not allowed to participate in the collection of taxes. Li Zhong also established various government offices such as the Population Statistics Department and the Farmland Exploration Department. He also prepared the existence of security teams in each of the grain districts. The specific authority was divided in detail and adopted a system of joint punishment. If there was a problem in any aspect, which led to a discrepancy in the amount of taxes paid, everyone would be punished. Although these new government offices established by Li Zhong were scattered in various places, none of them were under the jurisdiction of the local government. Their food and clothing were all provided by the northern frontier prince's residents. Moreover, they were all empty titles. When they met the local government officials, they still had to bow and salute. However, they also had the ability to directly report to the northern frontier prince's residence. It could be said that both sides were restricting each other. In addition, except for the grain chief, the other empty titles were all not ordinary people. The person in charge of each department would be transferred every 3 years. After 3 years, they would be transferred to another place to take up the same official position. After 9 years, if they were capable and had outstanding political achievements, they would be given priority in promotion to the various government offices under the northern frontier prince's residence. In these 9 years, if their political achievements were mediocre, they would undergo another 9 years of assessment. If their political achievements were bad, they would be immediately removed from their official position and would be investigated. The staff members below the division chief were all graduates of the Northern Frontier Academy. They were also changed every 3 years. During their employment, they could submit their resumes to the various government offices under the Northern Frontier Prince's residence to be recruited. However, they would not be given priority in recruitment. In addition to this internal system, there was also the supervision of the Demon Emperor Association under Lin Yuan's command, who appeared and disappeared mysteriously. The various government offices with empty titles, local government offices, the Demon Emperor Association, the Grain Chief, and other parties would make the same matter several times more detailed. It was not troublesome for everyone to carry out their tasks. They could also supervise each other to ensure that there would not be any conflicts. In addition, the officials with empty titles would be transferred to other places to carry out their tasks just like the official officials. There was no such thing as a flowing city lord being an ironclad official. The third matter was back to the land clearing project. Due to man-made factors, natural disasters, and other factors, the yield of the cultivated land would decrease or increase. Moreover, the land needed to be cultivated year after year. Otherwise, the land would lose its fertility and would no longer be able to grow good crops. Therefore, clearing the land was not a one-time project. After every harvest, the land would be cleared again. At the same time, a census of the population would be conducted in each settlement to ensure that there would not be any fraud. This series of reforms simply made some people with ulterior motives dumbfounded. After all, Lin Yuan was now working for the welfare of the people in the northern frontier. Establishing a complex and fair system would not cause any dissatisfaction. However, to them it was extremely bad news. Whether they wanted to reap benefits or sabotage, Lin Yuan's move meant that they would not have that opportunity. Late at night, in the northern frontier prince's mansion, Li Zhong finished sorting out the documents in his hands and sealed the files. Only then did he yawn and get up from his office desk. He stretched his body and looked at the groups of patrolling guards outside. His pair of slender sword-like eyebrows were slightly furrowed. The land clearing project was completed, but the biggest problem was still unsolved. For example, the taxes for the officials and the people, and how should the land distributed to the farmers be divided? As the old saying goes, one does not worry about scarcity, but about uneven distribution. Some people took more land, while others took less. When the time came, there would definitely be disputes. At the same time, this was also the last chance for the aristocratic families to struggle. Furthermore, being an official in the northern frontier prince's mansion meant that they no longer had the benefits of tax reduction. Even if they could become the prince of the northern frontier, they would still have to pay 50% of the taxes on their own land. Although their salaries had increased a lot compared to the time when the Shenwu dynasty ruled the northern frontier, they still felt that something was missing without the income from the land under their names. It was easy for the civil and military officials in the northern frontier prince's mansion to lose their motivation and only know how to live in their own positions. Even if he set up a strict official evaluation system, it was useless. For these people, it was better to save up some capital to do business with the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce than serve the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion. Although the salary given by the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion was not small, it paled in comparison to the benefits of a business transaction with the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. Although Li Zhong seemed to have a lot of authority in the land clearing project, the 10 years of tax reduction, the taxes for the officials and the people, as well as the establishment of various government offices were all things that Lin Yuan had prepared long ago. He only needed to take them out at the right time. When it came to other issues, even if Li Zhong had 10,000 ideas, he would not dare to make a decision on his own. "Mr. Li, are you planning to go back and rest?" A patrolling guard greeted Li Zhong with a smile. This guard was the one who had announced in Hu Yan's mansion that the people were storming the gate. He was originally a secret agent of the Association of the Demon Emperor. Although he was barely receiving a salary from the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion, serving Hu Yan and serving Lin Yuan were two different things. With the merit of bringing Hu Yan down, this god had become a captain of the permanent guards of the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion. He was in charge of thousands of people. He was not a big figure in the whole Northern Frontier, but in Shunning City, where there were only 100,000 Prince's mansion guards, he was a Qianhu. Chapter 425. No, it's just an if. I want to see his lordship Dragon King. Li Zhong smiled politely at the other party. Whether a person was smart or not, it did not depend on whether he could speak eloquently or come up with clever plans, but whether he could recognize his own position. Although Li Zhong was now in charge of the land clearance and other matters, during the period when Hu Yan was under house arrest, the various departments of the Northern Frontier Palace had to deploy all their manpower to assist him. Currently, he could be considered as the highest-ranking official in the Northern Frontier Palace. However, this was only temporary. Once the land clearance was completed, and the subsequent developments were on the right track, Li Zhong, this Mr. without any official position, would no longer be considered a big shot in the Northern Frontier Palace. Even if the Lord Dragon King would reward him handsomely, in terms of name, this Lord Qian who before him would be able to crush him to death. Hu Yan had been as careful and cautious as Li Zhong back then. Otherwise, after Lei Fan had been forced to leave, the position of king of the northern frontier would not have fallen onto Hu Yan's head. And during that period of time, because of the Green Swamp Tribe and the Ether Society, Lin Yuan had neglected the situation in the northern frontier palace. Therefore, although Hu Yan did not have Lei Fan's ability and influence, but during that period of time, his authority was much greater than Lei Fan's. Hu Yan had fallen into the trap for two reasons. Firstly, Lin Yuan had already planned this. After all, he wanted to support the new laws of the northern frontier and not the king of the northern frontier. As a member of an aristocratic family, it was only a matter of time before Hu Yan would clash with Lin Yuan over the land clearance issue. Secondly, it was because Hu Yan had become too arrogant. Otherwise, he would not have come up with the idea of going against Li Zhong to stop the land clearance project. Of course, it was still the same old saying that Hu Yan had fallen to such a state today. It was not because Lin Yuan had forced him to do it. Hu Yan and Lei Fan had died in the same way. They had both grasped authority, but did not have enough authority. Arrogance and greed had caused him to have a rebellious heart, and that was why he had fallen to such a state. Learn from the mistakes of others and learn from the mistakes of others. Hu Yan had not learned his lesson from Lei Fan, but Li Zhong had learned his lesson from Lei Fan and Hu Yan. Naturally, he would not be arrogant. Lord Dragon King? Lord Dragon King is currently in the front yard of the residence. If you go now, you should still be able to make it. Qianhu smiled kindly at Li Zhong. During this period of time, Lin Yuan would make a trip to the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion every day to check on the progress of the land clearing project. At the same time, he would also check on how much surplus grain was left in the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion, and whether it was enough to supply other projects in the Northern Frontier and the implementation of the new policies. At the same time, he would also listen to the opinions of the officials working in the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion. Li Zhong nodded and thanked Qianhu before walking towards the front yard. For the other officials to want to enter and leave the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion freely, it was not a realistic thing. Each department had their own office space, and even Hu Yan could not casually interfere with the operations of each department. But Li Zhong was different. As the most popular person in the Northern Frontier, even if Li Zhong had no official position at the moment, everyone knew that it would not be long before Li Zhong would become a big figure who could shake the entire Northern Frontier with just a stomp of his feet. It was not to the extent that everyone would come up to fawn on him, but there were still quite a number of people who came up to Li Zhong to get acquainted with him. When Li Zhong came to the front yard of the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion, Lin Yuan, who was sitting cross-legged, was looking at him with a pair of different-colored eyes, his gaze filled with a hint of ridicule, a hint of playfulness, and a hint of contemplation. "Lord Dragon King, your student pays his respects to you." Li Zhong clasped his fist and bowed to Lin Yuan in greeting. Lin Yuan nodded slightly in return, his gaze still shining as he looked at Li Zhong. He had no intention of taking the initiative to speak, but his gaze was clearly telling Li Zhong, "I already know what you're thinking." Li Zhong did not put on an act. He simply walked in front of Lin Yuan and voiced his concerns one by one. "That's it." Lin Yuan tilted his head and calmly said, "I thought that your brain was one of the smartest in the world. Is it that difficult to solve the problem of those officials' ambition? I gave you the authority to set up a government office without official posts, but you didn't get any inspiration? And before, the noble families were reduced from land taxes. As the person in charge of the land clearance project, don't you know to set up a business tax reduction for them? This, your student doesn't dare." The corner of Li Zhong's mouth twitched slightly. He clasped his fist and said, "You let your student set up a government office without official posts. Your student thought hard and felt that although these government offices increased expenses, they reduced the chances of officials being corrupt. At the same time, with an official evaluation system, they could also select more and better talents for our Northern Frontier Prince's residence. It's just like how some people are suitable for writing, but can't become an official. Some people are suitable for being an official, but have no education. These government offices without official posts are like a demon-revealing mirror. With one try, you can see if they're made for it." At this point, Li Zhong paused, adjusted his train of thought, and continued, "Although your student has the intention to imitate, I can't think of a method similar to Dragon King's. Not only are the government offices useless, but they will also make the organization bloated, and we have to spend a lot of unnecessary expenses every year." Li Zhong first praised Lin Yuan's brilliance, then humbly asked Lin Yuan for his perseverance. However, he didn't mention his own ideas or the business tax reduction that Lin Yuan mentioned. It wasn't that Li Zhong didn't have any ideas, but when meeting with his superior, he had to be more thoughtful. After all, strictly speaking, these things were outside of Li Zhong's authority. If he made a detailed plan, it would be overstepping his authority. As for the business tax reduction, it was completely up to Lin Yuan. After all, if this matter wasn't handled well, it would create a large number of new noble families. Although the noble families of the Northern Frontier hadn't been destroyed, in the Northern Frontier, noble families had become a derogatory term. Lin Yuan definitely didn't want the current situation to change. What? Is the government office without official posts the kind that doesn't work and only takes money? Go back and draft a notice. Anyone who has been an official in the Northern Frontier Prince's residence for 60 years will have their descendants supported by the Northern Frontier Prince's residence. Lin Yuan looked at Li Zhong for a while, then suddenly laughed and softly muttered a few words. Li Zhong immediately frowned and whispered, "Dragon King, Lord Dragon King, firstly, no one has done this before. Secondly, it's not very attractive. For the current Northern Frontier, it's better to do business than to be an official. 60 years in the Northern Frontier Prince's residence is really not as good as 60 years in business with the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. Not to mention supporting their descendants, it wouldn't be a problem to ensure 3 or 4 generations of prosperity. Then it's a problem with your choice of words." Lin Yuan said with an unfathomable expression, "What if you say that the Northern Frontier Prince's residence will establish the embroidered uniform guard, and that anyone whose father has been an official in the Northern Frontier Prince's residence for 60 years will have a nominal position in the embroidered uniform guard, 2 ranks lower than their father, and 2/3 of the salary of an official of the same rank?" You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.